unusual places, and I'm living it like young. Then I dig me this face of all faces. He's the craziest like young. He drinks coffee at Cafe Espresso. He reads Kerouac like young. He goes where all the angry young men go. Recites poetry like young. We start low in the pad round 11, and we're home in it like now. We spin records on cloud number 7. He starts reaching me like wow. I'm so unstrung, 'cause man, he's got me feeling like young. If he were to ditch me and go, I'm starting to wear my hair again, like a spare again. I keep getting the craziest notion. I think maybe it's like love. I've been feeling a crazy emotion. I think, baby, it's like love. Now we're riding a rainbow to Cloudsville, and we're making it like love. Love, soft as April snow. It's love, warm as candle glow. Yes, it's love. Love is easy go. Love is easy go.
Okay, if we can take our seats. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the City Council meeting of June 20th, 2017 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hotchkiss? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Dominguez?
Here.
Mayor Schneider?
Here.
Councilmember Rouse?
Here.
Councilmember Hart?
Here.
Councilmember Maria?
Here.
And Councilmember White, not yet present.
Changes to the agenda.
Yes, Madam Mayor. We would like to pull item 18 with regards to the Tenant Protection Task Force. We want to make some adjustments to the recommendation. We'll bring it back most likely next week.
Great. And also, we had a closed session before this session. We continued the item till after the open part of this meeting to continue the item. With that, we have public comment, and I have a few speaker slips here. I'm going to start. We have 2 minutes here at the podium, and there we go. And I think there's a bunch of girls in red shirts. I want to invite the group from Girls Inc. here, and I had met with them very briefly in my office. They had a whole lot of questions, but I think there's someone from the Girls Inc. group that may want to speak if you want to come up at this point. Who wants to come up? You can go first. Who's going to do it? All right, come on up. There we go. Strong, smart, and bold. That's what they are. Come on up. Okay, all right, welcome. So why don't you, if you can say, yep, you can, either microphone doesn't, and you can bring it down and just say your name and why you're here and whatever you want to say about the city. You got 2 minutes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Christina. I was just wondering what inspired you to be mayor?
Well, so the way public comment works, we can't really, you have to tell me what you're thinking about the city.
Oh.
So why don't you tell me what you would like to see the city do? Like what things you like? Or needs to be improved? We get those all the time.
I'm not so sure. Maybe not that much littering or something.
Not much litter, that's good. And tell me about Girls Inc.
Girls Inc.'s really fun. We learn how to be strong, smart, and bold, and we learn a lot of things. We do a lot of art projects and a lot of activities.
Great. And have you been to City Hall before?
No.
No. Well, thank you for coming, and you're all welcome to come back anytime. Thank you, Girls Inc. All right. All right, we're going to have Raquel Vela, and then followed by Dylan Schultz. Is Raquel here? Come on up, Raquel.
Hello, everybody. The troublemaker is here, but not for nothing bad. I only come in for say thank you, but because triumphantly trimming the trees in Carrillo Street. I go probably every day. I come in the office and triumphantly today clean it up. I'm very sorry when I sweep the street, I put the garbage in the mirror. Thank you. Say thank you to your employments. I go personally and say to everybody thank you. I don't take your time. Today is a good day.
Thank you, Raquel.
Goodbye.
Dylan Schultz will be followed by Denise Adams.
Hi. I'm speaking on behalf of Equity for Santa Barbara today. Over the past few months, we at Equity for Santa Barbara have been encouraging community involvement as the police department modernizes its use of force policy. We discovered that major contemporary reports about use of force recommend that use of force policies contain 11 key policy points which the police department's current policy lacks. After discussing our mutual desire for broad community involvement with representatives from the police department, we held a public event on June 1st to discuss these policy points with the community. Over 75 people attended. The community members at the event unanimously endorsed all 11 policy points. And many attendees voiced additional feedback about police use of force in Santa Barbara, which we collected and reviewed. We emailed these results in detail to the police department the week before last. Equity for Santa Barbara looks forward to collaborating with the police department as we continue to pursue our common goal, giving all stakeholders a voice in this as this crucial policy is updated. Thank you for your time.
Denise Adams will be followed by Michael Baker.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council people. I'm here because I applied for an accessory dwelling unit in April, and I cannot find where the City Council adopted any ordinances related to ADUs, and therefore the state law that is applicable to applicants. So I'm here to request, based on the letters I received from Can and Will Serve, that the Water Commission and the Sewer meet with the city attorney so that things can get sorted out to ensure that the letters that are issued by the city comply with state law, unless there are conditions or any ordinance that I'm unaware of and I can't find that was adopted prior to April. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Michael Baker, and then Margaret Saveda.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's Michael Baker, CEO for United Boys and Girls Clubs here in Santa Barbara County. As you know, I've spoken to you before about the importance of that 105th day. That's the most important day in Boys and Girls Clubs. We have the goal of getting every child to attend the Boys and Girls Club 105 days in a calendar year. And last year we had the awesome opportunity to have the kids recognized at City Council. And I'm here to talk to you again about that opportunity. We actually have 15 children at our West Side Club that have already attained 105 days of attendance at the West Side Club, which is a phenomenal feat. They're well underway to the 200 days. So I'd love to see the opportunity if we could possibly do that again this year for our children, do a recognition, and hopefully the mayor can be there this time. I know she missed it last time, but she told me she'd be here the next time for sure. But again, I want to thank you for your continued support. And I do have to say, I've been to a lot of city council meetings. This was the best Pledge of Allegiance I've ever heard in a city council meeting. It's because the kids are here. So thank you again.
That's right. Thank you. Margaret Saavedra. And then someone who wants to talk about liveaboard full-time RV vehicles. I didn't see a name, so you're next. And bienvenidos.
Bienvenidos. Margaret Saavedra, I'm sorry, I forgot my badge. President of Santa Barbara Sister Cities with Puerto Vallarta. And we're here on the occasion that this is the annual visit of our Puerto Vallarta visitors. They're here for 1 week, and this is their last day. So I am going to have our my co-president, Puerto Vallarta. She's going to say a few words and I'll translate.
Hola, buenas tardes. Para mí es un gusto estar nuevamente en esta hermosa ciudad y con todos ustedes, como cada año desde hace aproximadamente 44 años. Y
She's very happy to be here in this beautiful city and with the friends. They've been in relationship for 44 years.
Y pues es una hermosa ciudad y muchos los beneficios que hemos recibido en Puerto Vallarta. Y sería un placer y con que puedan visitarnos y siempre los esperaremos con los brazos abiertos.
She is very appreciative of all of the efforts and projects we've conducted in Puerto Vallarta. She wants to thank us for that. And she is inviting all of the council members. We've had Jason, we've had Helene, and so any others, Kathy, if you'd like to attend, we'd be happy to have you. We also have with us today 6 other members. ¿Se quieren parar?
Bienvenidos. Yeah. Okay.
There were a total of 14, but some have already left to go home. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for all your
Muchas
work.
gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. So I didn't catch the name of someone who wanted, and if you could give me your name so we can put it on the record, and then Tracy Trotter will be after you.
Sorry about that.
That's
I
all right.
haven't filled out enough of those, I guess. Wanda Livernoy.
There we go.
I want to know if we have passed any regulations concerning liveaboards full-time in RV vehicles, and when there is a transgression, who do you contact? Those are my main concerns these days. Okay?
Okay, we can have someone get back to you with that. Thank you. Tracy Trotter, and Ryan Howe, and then Bonnie Raisin.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to reserve my comment until after subject number 19.
Oh, you're at number 19? Okay. All right, thank you. Is that the same thing with Mr. Howe? Are you here for that item 19? All right. And then Bonnie Raisin.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'm here on a subject that I believe you're going to be taking up next week, and that is the increase in the 1-cent sales tax. I'm thinking that in addition to funding infrastructure and repairs, I'm concerned, and after visiting a website called Transparent California, that one of the big reasons for the road repairs and infrastructure faults are because of pensions and liabilities. We have hardworking employees in the city of Santa Barbara. They earn a great deal of money at the same time, and I'm not sure and would like to be reassured that if the voters approve a 1-cent sales tax in November, that money is truly all going to infrastructure repairs, which is $80 million plus total, I understand. In increments, it will be on the ballot to be paid in increments. But my concern after going to Transparent California's website, will the voters be assured that no monies that they will be voting for, the 1-cent sales tax increase, will go to pensions and liability increases? I think it would be very reassuring for me as a voter to know that. So I know you're going to be taking this up next week, and any answers that you can give me, I would appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. We're on to the consent calendar, and there's some items to read.
Item 2, adoption of 2016 to 2018 General Unit Memorandum of Understanding. Recommendation that Council ratify the Memorandum of Understanding between the City and the Santa Barbara City Employees Association, Local 620, Service Employees International Union, for the period of October 1, 2016 through March 30th, 2018, and adopt by reading of title only, An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the 2016 to 2018 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara City Employees Association General Unit, and providing for compensation changes for confidential employees. Item 3, adoption of ordinance for airline terminal solar photovoltaic power purchase agreement at 500 Fowler Road. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a power purchase agreement with EEI Solar One LLC to develop, own, operate, and maintain a solar photovoltaic generating system at the airport and sell all power generated to the airport. Item 4, records destruction for the Public Works Department. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara relating to the destruction of records held by the Public Works Department in the Transportation Planning and Parking, Streets Operations and Infrastructure Management, and Water Resources Divisions. Item 5, public at-grade crossing agreement with Union Pacific Railroad for the Lower Milpas Street Sidewalk Infill Project. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara to enter into a public highway at-grade crossing agreement with Union Pacific Railroad for the Lower Milpas Street Sidewalk Infill Project located partially at 335 South Milpas Street, assessor's parcel number 017-010-065, and over assessor's parcel number 017-010-050, no street address, and authorize a public works director, subject to approval as to form of the public highway at-grade crossing agreement by the city attorney, to execute such agreement and related documents that may be required, all relating to the Lower Milpas Street Pedestrian Improvement Project, and consenting to the recordation of the agreement or memorandum of the agreement in the official records, County of Santa Barbara. And item 13, parking and business improvement area annual assessment rates for fiscal year 2018, public hearing. Recommendation that council consider any appropriate protests to the parking and business improvement area annual assessment report for fiscal year 2018 as required under the California Parking and Business Improvement Area Law of 1989, and adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara fixing and assessing the parking and business improvement area assessment rates for fiscal year 2018 and confirming approval of the parking and business improvement area annual assessment report for fiscal year 2018.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. Mr. Hotchkiss and Mr. Rouse.
I think we both have to be excluded from 18. Was it the
13?
13. And also, I wanted to pull item 8 for a separate vote.
Okay. Let's do item 13 first. That was just read. It's the Parking Business Assessment District. Mr. Rouse?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I am a PBI paying member, so I will be abstaining from this vote.
Okay.
I'd like to move that item, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Do they need to leave the room?
No, it's just on consent. So
Okay.
Moved by Murillo, second by White. This is item number 13. All in favor?
Aye.
And
Abstain.
Abstain.
2 abstentions, Hotchkiss and Rouse. Okay, and then item number 8, that is...
Legislative platform.
Yeah, it's the update of the state and federal legislative platform. Mr. Hotchkiss?
Madam Mayor, items 59, 60, and 72, I'd like to be on record to oppose this for the platform. These are limiting our source of energy, specifically petroleum. We voted actually as a county some time back to limit exploration, and that was defeated. So my position is consistent with the rest of the county, but not with the rest of the city council.
Okay, Mr. White?
Madam Mayor, so perhaps if we were to have a vote on everything else, that we would at least have unanimous support for that, for 99% of our legislative platform.
Agreed.
I would make that the motion to approve the rest of it, besides the 3 elements that Mr. Hotchkiss alluded to.
I'd second that.
So can you recite which number? It was 59. What were the other 2?
59, 60, and 72.
59, 60, and 72. So there's a motion by White, second by Hotchkiss, just on those items. Okay, so...
No, excluding those items.
Everything except those 3.
Everything except those items. So it's to move the legislative platform with the exception of those 3 items, okay? And then we'll vote on those 3 items separately. So to the motion, Mr. Dominguez?
So we're going to have one motion to approve this platform that's going to be potentially unanimous, and then a second one to approve the other 3. So we're going to have 2 motions to accept, so we get a That's not going to create problems?
No.
Okay.
Mr. White, your
Democracy.
light's on. Did you have something else? Is that it?
I was waiting
Okay.
to.
All right. So the motion is for the legislative platform minus those 3 items. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Is there a motion?
So I'd move the 3 items.
Number 59, number 60, and number 72.
Second.
Second by Murillo. Mr. Hart.
Yeah, I just had a question for Councilmember Hotchkiss. You supported these items at the Legislative Committee. What has changed?
Nothing changed. It's just I wanted to bring it up at this level.
But you voted for it at the.
I voted for the whole thing through just so that I could bring it to here and bring it to public attention.
But you voted on the individual items too at the Legislative Committee.
I'm opposing those now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposition from Mr. Hotchkiss. Otherwise, passed 6-1. Okay. Anything else on the consent calendar? Is there a motion for the balance of the consent calendar?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Is there a second? Second motion by Murillo, second by Rouse. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that everybody? Okay, that's unanimous. All right. It was a very small aye. Great. All right, that concludes the consent calendar, and we move on now to item number 15.
Item 15, resolution to authorize property assessed clean energy PACE in the city. Recommendation that Council A adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the City of Santa Barbara consenting to the inclusion of properties within the territory of the City of Santa Barbara in California Statewide Communities Development Authority CSCDA Open PACE program, authorizing CSCDA to accept applications from property owners, conduct contractual assessment proceedings, and levy contractual assessments within the territory of the City of Santa Barbara, and authorizing related actions. And B, direct staff to develop participation agreements between the City of Santa Barbara and the Open PACE administrators for consideration and approval by Council at a later date.
Thank you. Mr. Four.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm Matt Four. I'm Senior Assistant to the City Administrator. Here today to talk about PACE financing. This is a topic that we brought to your council back in October of 2016 as an informational item. You gave us some homework to do, and so we've completed that and undergone some additional analysis, and we're back with a recommendation today. We're going to talk about a couple things today, a little bit of background, talk about the risk analysis to both consumers and the city related to PACE financing. You directed us to undergo and to conduct some stakeholder engagement. So we'll go into that. We've come to some conclusions about the program that we'll share, also our recommendation, and then if approved by council today, there will be some next steps. So by way of background, what is PACE financing? It's essentially a tool, one of many tools that allow property owners to finance energy and water efficiency projects. It was authorized by Assembly Bill 811, and it specifically authorizes jurisdictions to create a voluntary assessment district. And so that's what your resolution would contemplate today. Property owners, both residential and commercial, can then borrow money essentially to pay for these energy efficiency and water efficiency projects. And the debt is paid back as part of the property taxes. So the debt runs with the land regardless of who the owner is. And the repayment terms are based upon the usable life of the improvements. So for something like an HVAC system, it might be 10 years. For solar panels or a larger solar project, it may be 20 years. But the intent is to have the repayment term align with the usable life of the efficiency projects that were installed. So who can be eligible under this program? Residents and businesses. So single-family residential, multi-unit residential, office buildings, hotel, retail, some commercial. Just about the whole gamut is eligible to finance these efficiency projects through the property tax bill. The types of things that are able to be financed: heating and ventilation, efficiencies, lighting, water pumps, water conservation measures, insulation, as we mentioned, solar panels, roofing, windows, all sorts of things that would bring efficiencies to a building. So how it works. A property owner will essentially find a contractor. They'll be interested in a project find a contractor, select the project or slate of projects to be done to the building. And then as part of the financing options, if PACE is right for the property owner, then they can apply to a PACE program, submit an application, and if they meet the underwriting criteria, then they would be funded. The contractor then completes the work, and this is kind of an important point in terms of one of the consumer protections. The PACE program then pays the contractor after the landowner signs off that the work was done to his or her satisfaction. The property owner then pays for the project throughout the life of the term on their property tax bill. So what are the benefits? Well, certainly energy and water efficiency, and that's something that's come to your council numerous times. That efficiency and conservation are the bedrock of these programs, and we try to reach our goals through efficiency first before we look at new sources. Economic development, these projects are installed by contractors, whether they're heating and ventilation or windows or solar panels. We need skilled professional work in order to make that happen. Studies have found that home values can increase as these measures are put into place. Lower utility bills. As one makes their home or commercial property more efficient, the thought is that the utility bills will be lower for water and energy. And this can certainly support the city's sustainability goals. So things like energy efficiency, it's one of our primary sustainability programs, and it goes hand in hand with our renewable energy goals that we brought to your council on June 6th. So we mentioned that in that presentation, we will, in many ways, reach our goals by limiting the amount of overall energy that the city needs to use, and that could be accomplished through this program. Title 24 has a mandate for all new construction to be zero net energy, and those mandates generally increase year over year through the state legislature, even for existing stock. Water conservation, it goes without saying that these projects can help with that. Greenhouse gas reductions and the nexus to our climate action plan. The less energy we use, the fewer greenhouse gas emissions we generate. So staff queried our neighboring counties, San Luis Obispo and Ventura counties, and over the life of the projects that have been financed by PACE, combined, they have found about 13 million gallons of water saved and about 6,850 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents emissions avoided. So it's got some potential. So those are the benefits. And then we looked at the risk analysis. So we looked at the risk profile from two different points of view. The first is to the consumer. And like any credit program, any consumer credit program, they can pose some level of risk to consumers from two different sources. The first is just a lack of financial acumen by the consumer itself. If they don't have the wherewithal to understand the terms and conditions, the interest rates, the restrictions, and how this might fit into sales transactions on the property, then they can be harmed by that. And we've found that during the housing crisis, that some consumers were harmed just because they didn't understand what they were getting into with home sales. The second source is the potential for unscrupulous salespeople or contractors. So, like any industry, there are good apples and bad apples, and there might be some unscrupulous salespeople or contractors. The difference with this program is, unlike a business who may simply take out a business license and not have to conduct any tenant improvements to the business building in the city, under this program, your council has to specifically open the door to these operators. That's the big difference. And so we want to be, at least share with you what the risk can be to the consumer from that. Now, despite the risk, there are mitigations to that risk, and they come from three different sources. The first are statutory protections. And AB 2693 that was passed in 2016 formally codified some consumer protections that all PACE providers have to abide by now. Things like a know before you owe financing form, so that the written disclosures are very clear. Consumers, as they are signing up for this financing, they go line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and have to initial certain sections that, yes, I've read it and I understand it. The second is a 3-day right to cancel provision. This is the buyer's regret provision that, wait, I didn't know what I was getting into, I didn't understand that, and I have 3 days to cancel that contract. The second source of mitigations are voluntary, and many of the PACE providers, including the Open PACE program that we are recommending today, have gone above and beyond the strict statutory thresholds and to conduct confirmation of term phone calls. These are phone calls for certain populations like the elderly and things that outside of the contractor's presence will receive a phone call from the PACE administrator verifying, do you understand these terms that you are about to sign on to? The third are things like other consumer protection policies, and there's a nationwide consumer protection policy that the PACE Nation group has adopted that was actually co-authored by the Open PACE program that we're recommending, as well as HERO, that goes into a whole slate of consumer protection policies that these administrators have signed on to and said we will voluntarily comply with. And finally, the final set of mitigations, contractor oversight. So we have spoken at length with the Open PACE program about their the requirements that they place on their administrators in terms of overseeing the contractors that work within their stable. They have to sign on to a code of conduct. They are required to have contractors' licenses and to maintain those in good standing. There are fairly robust contractor training programs. As I mentioned previously, contractors only get paid after the property owner gives consent to make the payment. And also monitoring, through customer surveys, but also the Better Business Bureau, the licensing board, as well as Yelp, things like social media to say, how was your experience and what's the community saying about the contractors that we're using? So that's for the customer. For the city, we looked at the risk to the city. Well, the first was the general fund, and there's no risk to the city's general fund. These voluntary assessments are between the property owner and the PACE provider, and if there's a default or if there's a lack of payment, it does not come back to the city to make good on that debt that was issued. The second risk to the city, though, is a potential risk to our brand and reputation, and that's the difference between this program and other businesses. It's your council has to open the door to this program, and so if there are customers who have a bad experience, whether it's due to the provider or due to their lack of understanding, our brand can be harmed by that. So the mitigation to that is to start slow and to authorize a reputable PACE provider. And that's, if you choose to go forward with this program, the resolution that we've included in your packet reflects just that advice. We're starting slow. We're starting with a program that we have been a historic member through that JPA, and has a good record based on the due diligence that we've conducted thus far. So we can start slow, see how it goes, make sure that we understand what we're getting into. So the next topic, stakeholder engagement. Back in 2016, your council, after that informational item, you asked us to go and convene a meeting between the PACE providers and primarily the Association of Realtors, but also the lending community. And so we did just that. And in February of 2017, we hosted that meeting. It was a good meeting. We had very good discussion and good discourse. And I think the outcome of that is there was mutual agreement on the part of the PACE administrators and the Association of Realtors that the written disclosures are satisfactory. That right to know lending form and the written disclosures that are contained therein have improved, and they're now satisfactory to both groups. The second outcome was a greater understanding of the process and the success rate in subordinating PACE liens to the first and second mortgage. PACE liens are a bit of a different animal in that because they are a lien on the property taxes, they hold a superior position to the first and second mortgages. And in 2010, the Federal Housing Finance Authority notified the mortgage administrators that they would no longer purchase mortgages with PACE liens on them. And so the PACE providers came up with a workaround to that, and that was to contractually subordinate the PACE lien to the secured mortgages. It still stays in the first position, but it's contractually subordinated. And so that if it comes time for a property sale and there's this PACE lien, if there's a problem with the mortgage underwriter, it can be subordinated. If it can't, if there are other reasons why it's not going to work, then it becomes a point of negotiation as part of the property sale, like any number of points of negotiation. The property owner may look at the title and say, well, I don't want this lien on there. You're going to have to pay that off. And that may be a point of negotiation. We're okay with that, provided that the property owner understood that that could be a potential outcome when he or she signed on for the financing itself. So we see that the disclosures are key. The second thing that occurred was in 2014, the state, in response to FHFA's declaration, established a loan loss reserve to protect the first mortgage holders in case of foreclosure. So in case there's a foreclosure and there's a loss of revenue, the mortgage providers could tap into that loan loss reserve. To date, it's never been accessed. So it still exists, but it's never been tapped. Those are the areas of agreement or greater understanding. There are remaining areas of disagreement between the PACE administrators and the real estate and lending community. The first has to do with the appropriateness of interest rates and fees charged. Generally speaking, PACE assessments are higher than home equity lines of credit, but they're lower than unsecured debt like a credit card. So there is a certain class of customers that this works for. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't work for everybody. The difference with PACE liens and PACE financing is that it's always fixed. So HELOCs are variable. They can go up and down. PACE financing is fixed over the financing term. And the thought is, and it's not a one-to-one offset, but the thought is that the payment on the improvement will be offset by the energy and water savings on the utility bill. They're not equal, but it recognizes that, and at least it gives stability to the property owner that it's fixed over the term of the financing. So the mitigations to the higher interest rates, the way staff sees it, consumers are voluntarily incurring the debt to improve the property. It's not mandatory. This is a voluntary assessment and voluntary transactions. It's fixed term over the life of the assessment. Like I said, the utility bills act as an offset. The remaining areas of disagreement are risk to consumers, which I've already covered, and third, the potential for PACE liens to complicate real estate and refinance transactions. There is the ability to subordinate, but many still see this as an obstacle to a process for property sales and refinancings. So with all of that, what did we conclude? The first conclusion we came to are that multiple options are a critical element in realizing our efficiency goals. As I said before, this is not a silver bullet. This program in and of itself is not going to get us all of the gains that we are looking for with energy and water efficiency, but it's a tool, and it's another tool, and it does fit a certain class of customers who have found it to be successful, as evidenced by Ventura and San Luis Obispo counties. If it's implemented properly, PACE programs should pose little risk to the city. So if we choose a good operator, if they do indeed operate well, then it should pose little risk. And thirdly, this is just one of the unknowns, has to do with staffing resources and the level of oversight. So we can start slow. We're recommending that. We've talked to a number of jurisdictions, and the level of oversight and staff resources needed vary greatly depending on how successful the programs are and questions and things like that. So we feel comfortable that we have the staffing resources to implement the program that's recommended today. If it were to go beyond that, we would like to come back with a resource assessment. So our recommendation then, staff recommends that we do authorize one provider, and that's the Open PACE program. Open PACE is a PACE program that is administered by California Statewide Community Development Authority. We are a member of that statewide JPA by virtue of our membership in the League of Cities. We have a long history with CSCDA, seeing them put into place bond financing and revenue bonds and things like that. They're a well-known, reputable organization, and Open PACE is comprised of one program but 5 different administrators, all with a different niche and a different expertise. Some are solar, some are water, some are residential, some are commercial specific. But by signing on with one Open PACE program, we actually get some competition by way of 5 different operators that are competing for the business. So finally, if your council does authorize this resolution today to open the door to the Open PACE program, then we would request that you direct staff to go and negotiate and execute a participation agreement with each of those providers. The participation agreement will really codify some of the things that they are already voluntarily doing, things like the callbacks and data collection and things that we'd like them to share with the city. But we'd also like to add in some restrictions on using the city's name or the city's brand, or not saying, we are the officially endorsed blah, 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 right? We want to keep an arm's length there. And also to codify some indemnifications. And then we would return to council with those negotiated participation agreements at a later date. Beyond the city's work with the administrators, there is another agreement that would need to be executed, and that is between CSCDA and the county, and specifically the county auditor. And that would be to authorize the county auditor to place these PACE liens on the property tax rolls, and they would also outline the fees that would be charged for that work and ultimately passed on to the consumer through the lien instrument. So this is our recommendation. That's our presentation. With that, I could take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Four, is there a schedule of projects and allowable expenses as allowed by a PACE contractor? In other words, we're going to do solar panels and they have a price schedule, and then how does that work per region? And is it limited to that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilor Rouse, there's not a specific price schedule, but there are, what we've talked about with the PACE providers, there are ranges that are allowable. So as part of the financing or underwriting process, the contractor will put their costs into that approval form, and the PACE providers themselves will say, no, this is beyond the range of what is allowable or what we see.
Okay, and then does a client have to qualify like they would for any other kind of credit?
The underwriting criteria is different. It's set by the state treasurer's office. It's primarily equity-based. And the reason I actually called the treasurer's office and asked them about that, what the underwriting criteria says is there can't be any other substantial liens on the property. You cannot have been in default or some things like that. But really, the qualifying criteria has to do with the equity value on the property, because the property can change hands. And because the lien stays with the property, the individual capacity of the property owner is not unimportant, but less important or less of a focus.
So if somebody had a primary mortgage and they got a PACE loan and then they went to get a second mortgage or even a third, that would factor in, obviously, that could restrict their ability to further leverage their house or the property.
It would factor in, but my understanding is the liens are different in terms of the debt to equity ratios.
Okay. And then lastly, you mentioned choosing an agency or a contractor, whatever doing this. do we have to make a finding to choose or to not choose a specific operator? In other words, could we be held liable for not choosing one company over another, as we would in another kind of contract?
And I'll defer to the city attorney on that, but we did have a discussion about this, and we are in good standing with recommending the Open PACE program today.
Mr. Klon.
Mr. Klon?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, as near as I can tell, we don't own responsibility for the performance of these contractors.
Right, but if we authorize a certain contractor to the exclusion of another one, does that...
You mean, does the contractor excluded have reason to complain?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, thank you, Mr. Ford. The AB 2693 said something about a phone call to the property owner. I know you talked about that, but can you tell us a little more? Who makes the phone call?
It's the PACE administrator themselves. It's an independent confirmation of terms. And so the written disclosure form or the written finance form has these various written disclosures. And it's one more step to where the PACE administrator calls the property owner and says, let's run through this one more time. Do you understand the financing term, the interest rate, the total APR, the fact that that this PACE lien could complicate a future sales of the property, may need to be subordinated. If it could not be, then you may have to pay it off early. It's just an independent confirmation of the terms that they've already signed on to.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Early on, you showed different kinds of structures that could use a PACE, but now we're addressing primarily single-family residences. Is that where it's principally applied?
I don't know that I would say that, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss. I think that in terms of total value, commercial projects outstrip residential. But yeah, I don't know if I could say that primarily. What our resolution authorizes is for residential and commercial administrators to operate in the city. I think by sheer volume or the quantity of customers, it's probably residential, obviously. But the total value of assessments, I think it could very well be outstripped by commercial.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to public comment, and we'll start with, I think it's Kevin, is it Huber? Be followed by Mark Rogers. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Kevin Hauber. I'm Senior Loan Officer with the Mortgage House. I run the Green Division there. We have offices throughout Central and Southern California. I have been an advocate of energy and water efficiency financing for a long time and worked in a number of different roles in that. I was involved in the realtor contractor and public outreach when we brought PACE programs on in San Luis Obispo County. And that was here a few years ago. And I was subsequently asked to share the information that we did in that outreach on a broader basis, and I'm now doing that statewide. And the intent is to show how mortgage products and non-mortgage products can be used together to meet the needs for energy and water efficiency financing because it's expensive. And there's not, as Matt Four has mentioned, there is not one silver bullet. There needs to be a whole toolbox of solutions to be able to come up with these kinds of projects, and oftentimes in combination with each other. So we have come up with a presentation that we have shared so far in the Pismo Coast and San Luis Obispo Association of Realtors, in Salinas, and here in Santa Barbara. We have compiled, or I have compiled some of the information that I'll share. I don't know who distributes this. There you go. This is a sample of some of the information that we have shared with the real estate community about how these kinds of transactions work in concert with mortgage and non-mortgage products. We go through the legislation and the building codes that have come into effect over the last 11 years that are necessitating these kinds of programs. The There are matrices that go through the options of how can you actually put a project together and stack tools one on top of another, both incentives and financing. And there are examples of preliminary title report items that realtors need to be aware of in looking at both solar liens and PACE loans.
Thank you. That's it. You have 2 minutes, didn't you?
Oh, I thought I had 3. Okay.
Nope, there you go. But we have
Okay.
your information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Rogers will be followed by Matt Walker.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to speak in favor or in support of PACE and the recommendation that staff is making today. PACE is not only good, it's great. And we've proven that hundreds of thousands of times in communities across America by improving the quality and the value of homes, by improving the affordability to operate the home, lowering the consumer's energy bills, and of course by helping cities and counties across the country to meet the mandates like AB 32 in California. I'd like to urge you today to approve the CSCDA program. And even if you don't know anything about PACE, James Hamill is here, one of the most respected authorities in the state of California, and I would vote for it just because his name's on it if it were up to me. So I will say that. The other thing I'll actually say as well and just urge you to do is to help you delineate fact from fiction here. Require. I mean, everything we do is a matter of public record. Everything we do is recorded in the county assessors or the recorder's office. So if you're hearing these nightmares about PACE, then demand that you also see the records to prove it and not just fall for the rhetoric. So thank you so much.
Matt Walker will be followed by Dustin Rylick.
Thank you, Council. My name is Matt Walker, but I'm just here to support the program and not speak today, so I will defer my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dustin Rylick will be followed by Jeremy Huttman.
Hello, Madam Mayor, Council. Dustin Rylick. I'm the Director of Municipal Development for the California Hero Program. We're not on agenda today, but I'm here in support of PACE. Your staff took a very conservative stance in wanting to put their toe in the water about PACE and be able to start with one program through Open PACE through CSCDA, which you're already a member through the league. I hope that things will open up down the road to provide more options, but this is a great option, and at the same time, I wanted to go over some of the things that have changed over time about PACE and PACE operators. Many of the different things came under AB 2693 with the know before you owe requirements that are legislated. SB 242 has some requirements that are being put in about 100% confirmed term calls, like you had addressed. That's where a homeowner is on the line with the provider, a recorded call where it gets attached to that file and goes over all those terms, how the presentation was done, and all of those different factors. Income review is something that has become a staple as well, and we actually have implemented recently on our program. And the number one thing you have to remember is disclosures, disclosures, disclosures. Those have become very thorough so that a homeowner cannot get in over their head, and then we do a confirmed term call about it. The key here is if you sell or refinance your home, you may have to pay this off. And so it does become a hindrance sometimes on that transaction because you do, from a real estate side, have to look at the facts and look at what is on record and so forth. I know I'm probably short on my time, but I know that others will speak to this as well. And I hope that you, and urge that you move forward with the CSCDA Open PACE program as a starter. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms.
May I
Mario
ask
has a question for you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do you think that the installation of this kind of facility would inspire someone to buy that property? So
Yeah, you know, I think that a lot of energy efficiencies are great for a property, and it will inspire someone to buy a property. If it has new windows and doors, or it has a solar system that has no electricity bill, I'd buy that property because I know I've installed those on both of my homes as well. So I'm all for it, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Jeremy Huttman will be followed by David Kim.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Huttman, and I'm with Renew Financial. We're the administrator of the California First program. It's one of the programs that's part of CSCDA's Open PACE. So I just wanted to introduce myself and tell you who we are as a company. We're kind of in a unique position in that not only are we a PACE administrator, but we actually invented PACE. We created the program. Our CEO, when he was chief of staff to the mayor in Berkeley, created PACE as a service, as a benefit to the community. And it really proved to be very successful. And it was picked up really quickly by Berkeley. And then he spun off to offer this really great program to the entire state. And kind of the rest is history. We're available in about 400 communities throughout the state. This covers about 90% of the state now. And we're really proud to be able to offer homeowners something that helps make their homes more energy efficient. One of the reasons that we're so successful is that we've always approached PACE from the most conservative perspective possible, kind of from the perspective of local government, because that's really where we come from. And we've always pushed to make sure that consumer protections are the absolute best, and we're always pushing to make the industry better. So I know there's a lot of talk about AB 2693 and the disclosures. I'd like to actually pass that around to you so you can see firsthand what these look like.
You can give it to our clerk right there.
And so definitely take a look through that, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Another thing that I saw, I want to congratulate you all on adopting the 100% renewables resolution a few weeks ago. In the state, there's about 21 cities that have passed some sort of resolution or made some sort of indication they want to move towards 100% renewables. We're happy to say that 19 out of those 21 cities have PACE available, and they consider it a key policy tool to actually achieving that goal. So we're really excited to offer PACE locally and help you all achieve the goal of 100% renewables. Thank you.
Thank you. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did
Go
have
ahead,
just
Mr.
a
Hart.
question for Mr. Hutman. Do you know by chance what sort of the benchmark is for penetration in the marketplace in other counties or cities around the state? Our staff report just has examples for San Luis Obispo and Ventura counties, but there's a kind of a small pool of comparison. But what's the range of the most successful penetration that you know about?
I can just say, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly, but there have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 PACE assessments around the state. It's actually such a successful program. California Energy Commissioner David Hochschild recently said that it was the single most effective tool in achieving energy upgrades in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. David Kim will be followed by Kim Schaefer.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider and council members. My name is David Kim. I'm president of the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors. SBAOR has been a strong supporter of energy efficiency for our housing stock, but we cannot support PACE because it puts homeowners at risk with a program that has many problems. You have received our letter, which outlines our multiple concerns, which include inadequate disclosures, transactional difficulties, transferability and subordination of the loans, high interest rates, no proof of benefit or value to the homeowner, lack of regulation and oversight of these programs, alleged predatory lending and fraud, which has manifested in multiple class action lawsuits filed against PACE providers, and the local government agency has been named in these lawsuits. And just recently, investors in PACE bonds are rethinking their portfolio and are divesting from residential PACE investments. In speaking with other Association of Realtors throughout California and the nation, the National Consumer Law Center, and reading multiple news articles from sources such as the LA Times and the Wall Street Journal, we have good authority to be concerned about these PACE programs. We urge you to not adopt PACE at this time and will wait until Congress and the state hopefully pass legislation that will create regulations and oversight for this program. Until this program adheres to the same standards as other loans, we cannot support this program. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking these concerns under advisement.
Thank you. Mr. White has a question.
Yes. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that people are there is divesting going on from the PACE loans.
Correct.
Right? What's the result of that at this point? Are interest rates going up for those programs?
You know, I'll defer to our government affairs director, Krista Pleiser, on this.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hotchkiss, why don't you ask your question?
Yes, hi. Thank you. You wrote a
Ms.
compelling
Pleiser
letter.
can come on up. Go ahead.
Is that right? Go ahead.
Ask your question, sure.
You wrote a compelling letter. Places like 29 Palms or the county of, I guess, the city of Bakersfield, others this is sort of a reiteration of Mr. White, but Do you know why they're actually repealing? Has their experience been so negative that that's what they're doing?
I believe we actually have a government affairs director from Bakersfield here today.
Okay.
So I'm, again, going to defer to the people who are
I'd like to hear the
more
answer.
in the know on that.
She's the next speaker, by the way. But Ms.
Thank
Pleiser,
you.
did you want to, Mr. White, did you have a question that Ms. Pleiser wanted to answer? Or do you want to?
Wait till she comes up, but that'll be
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Kim Schaefer will be followed by Alec Bruce. Welcome to Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Kim Schaefer. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Bakersfield Association of Realtors. In Kern County, we've had PACE financing that's been authorized for about 3 years at the county level and about 2 years at the city level. Just last week, our Kern County Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to direct staff to rescind the resolution authorizing PACE. The meeting was packed with homeowners that have been significantly impacted by this program. This is not just a normal consumer lending situation. This involves people's homes, and oftentimes the elderly, folks that don't speak English, don't understand what they're getting into. It's not like a credit card debt where you ruin your credit if you don't make the payment. It's your home, and it impacts neighborhoods and families, communities. So I'm here today to ask you to not make the same mistake we made in our county. I would hold off. I think that the state and federal legislation, when it passes, will help tremendously to stop homeowners from being hurt. So thank you.
Thank you. Alec Bruce, be followed by Stacy Kaplan.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider, council members. My name is Alec Bruce. I am the Government Relations Chair and past president of the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors. As you have read in our letter and heard in our testimony both in October and today, SBAOR is not against energy efficiency. In fact, we embrace it, as is evident from our award-winning water conservation garden, the installation of solar, and numerous other energy efficiency upgrades on our building. We also provide realtors along the coast the National Association of Realtors Green Designation, which is designed for agents looking to learn about issues of energy efficiency and sustainability in real estate. Realtors promote the Empower Central Coast program as well as other energy efficiency programs. I state all of this because I want to make sure it's clear that we are not against energy efficiency. What we are against is a program that has known problems which affect homeowners and their greatest asset, their home. While we understand there are bad apples in every industry because industries are made up of humans, oversight and rules and regulations exist over consumer-based programs. PACE does not have any regulations or oversight except what they have created themselves. Unfortunately, at this time, PACE does not have a few bad apples, but the entire tree is bad. Please don't plant this tree in Santa Barbara unless regulations and oversight are passed by both Congress and California. Why rush with this program and put anyone at risk in the community when there are steps being made to fix this program and create protections for consumers? We yet again urge you to vote no on this issue. Thank you.
Stacy Kaplan will be followed by Eric Taji.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider, City Council members. My name is Stacy Kaplan. I'm a realtor. I am the past legislative chair for the California Association of Realtors, immediately past. And I'm also a director, which means I'm one of 900 realtors who vote on behalf of over 185,000 realtors up and down the state. And we have consistently been very concerned about this program over the last several years. As you know, the PACE loans currently require little to no underwriting, carry interest rates that are substantially higher than other available financing options, and contain repayment terms, typically 15 to 20 years, which may outlast the useful life of the financed program. They are not currently subject to nationwide nor statewide mortgage financing rules, meaning that a comprehensive underwriting of a borrower's income, debt, and credit history is not being conducted when a PACE loan is originated. That is why we support the bills going through Congress and the state that create more oversight and regulation, and ask you to hold off on any decision until this legislation is decided upon. We support the passage of California State AB 271 Caballero, which limits the ability of PACE providers to collect late fees that accrue on delinquent PACE assessments. We also support the passage of H.R. 1958, Sherman and Royce, which will rightfully provide these loans the same truth in lending consumer protections required of other mortgage products. I would like to reiterate that PACE loans are in substance consumer loans secured by real property and should be subject to federal and state consumer protection requirements. They should not be dependent on a patchwork of limited or non-existent local laws that do not adequately protect homeowners. I would also like to add that I'm a designated green realtor through the National Association of Realtors, past state chair of environmental issues committee, and I'm very much in favor of greening our housing stock, but not through this vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Taju will be followed by Dan. I think it's Modisette.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Eric Taiji. I'm a home loan originator in Santa Barbara for close to 20 years now, and I'm all for energy efficiency. I drive a hybrid car, and I'm here to speak out against PACE. I'd just like to reiterate, we've gone over the fact that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHFA will not accept these types of financing on properties. Jumbo lenders, so for sake of simplicity, loans above 625.5 that Fannie and Freddie will not purchase, also do not allow financing for either refinances or purchases. But one of my greater concerns that I'd like to speak about today is the lack of oversight for PACE financing. Now, as a lender, I am bound by law to provide what's called a standardized manner of disclosing to a borrower their costs and interest rate associated with a loan. If I were to take the percentages that PACE financing is charging in terms of the rates and the fees to my types of loans, I would be in violation of these acts and laws. And so the names of the laws and rules, I can't obviously explain too much about them right now, but their titles in and of themselves are pretty self-explanatory. The Truth in Lending Act, the Homeownership Equity Protection Act, so not eating into someone's equity too quickly, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. All of these are regulated by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The PACE lenders aren't currently subject to these acts, and this is what the congressional bill is trying to take up through what's called the PACE Act of 2017, which that bill, the acronym is Protecting Americans from Credit Exploitation. So this obviously is on the radar of our congressional leaders for consumer protection against high fees and rates, which they are if I were to translate them to my types of loans. And for these reasons, I do not believe that PACE financing should occur in Santa Barbara. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Dan, is it Modisette, and then followed by Mike Hackett, Lacey Robertson, and the final speaker will be April Price.
I'm Dan Modisette. I am a licensed general and solar contractor as well as a real estate broker. I've been engaged in Efficient Energy LLC for the last 15 years and have built the first structural insulated panel house in Ventura County and the first ICF insulated concrete form house in Coconino County, which is a ski area. I've been very involved in energy efficiencies and things that work. And I truly believe PACE works. Not for everybody, but it's one more bullet that we've got for somebody that's got substantial equity and maybe not as great a cash flow as they might hope for. This process, PACE will get them a loan that they can afford and pay off in 20 years. So I'm in favor of PACE and hope you approve it. And as a real estate broker, I'm very surprised at some of the negatives I heard today. I don't agree with them, but thank you.
Thank you. Mike Hackett, and then Lacey Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Mike Hackett. I've lived here in Santa Barbara for 14 years. I'm a homeowner. If you pass PACE, I will use it to upgrade my property in both the energy efficiency area and the in water savings as well. I'm speaking on my own behalf. I have a business called Energy Answers. We consult on commercial energy efficiency financing. I'm also here today as a board member of the Central Coast Green Building Council, which also supports PACE financing. We are particularly supportive of the the California State Communities Development Authority. The council, as you may recall, back in last October, has already endorsed a commercial PACE financing program. We believe that CSCDA is a recognized and responsible state agency that routinely offers advice and assistance to local governments regarding infrastructure needs. As you've heard earlier, the city already has a relationship with CSCDA. CSCDA is already operating in over 150 cities. To respond to an earlier question from Mr. Hart, of these 150,000 homes that have been improved, that's to the tune of over $2 billion in energy efficiency, water savings improvements, renewable energy improvements. There's been over $400 million on the commercial side of things. So it's really time for this to happen. It's happening all over the state. It's been delayed here in the city and county really for far too long. So rather than reverse the policies that the county has already, or the city has already adopted, including the renewable energy goals that you just said about a week and a half ago, I'd encourage you to allow the 21,406 residential property owners and 3,768 non-residential property owners in the city to have access to this voluntary program. Thank you.
Thank you. Lacey Robertson, April Price, and then James Hamill.
Good afternoon, Lacey Robertson, licensed realtor and loan consultant. The House has already been addressed. I'm here to speak opposition to PACE financing. Currently, there's been over 115,000 residential loans that have been assessed with PACE. That's about $2.68 billion, up from 3 years ago when it was only $350 million. I'll say this gross, sadly to say, has not come with honest dealings. PACE loans are given to anyone and everyone that owns a property, has equity, and is not an active BK, regardless if they can repay the loan. If this is not predatory lending, I don't know what is. PACE loans have increased in communities where seniors, low and middle class families reside because unsuspecting and or unsophisticated homeowners live there, and contractors and sales representatives selling the product are often least questioned, if questioned at all. If this is not predatory lending, I don't know what is. Warning comes before destruction, and this is why I'm here. I represent the families that have and are currently being victimized as I speak. I will tell you this. Don't let unqualified, unlicensed, unregistered individuals conduct mortgage and financing related activities in your city that don't have the same motivation as the consumer does. I have contributed to many of the Wall Street Journal cases. I'll tell you, homeowners are having property taxes go from $4,000 to over $10,000 a month, forcing a homeowner who did not want to sell, never thought to sell, to have a reverse mortgage. These confirmation calls, I've been there with clients, and the contractor is right there. I will tell you this, many of the homeowners do ask questions, but when you have unlicensed, unregistered professionals signing people up for loans, they don't even know what they're asking clients to sign. So they're getting misinformation.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. April Price.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. My name is April Price with the Community Environmental Council, and as you well know, my organization's work is promoting local solutions to climate change. I'm here this afternoon to support CEC's support of recommendations of city staff to allow open PACE in Santa Barbara. As Mr. Forer highlighted, PACE financing is working well across the state and simply gives homeowners another option in terms of financing energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. My organization is pleased to see the increased consumer protections that have already been incorporated in recent years, and we see PACE financing as simply one additional tool for homeowners that wish to take these responsible steps to decrease the energy use of their home. As the staff report highlights, PACE financing is not appropriate for all homeowners, but may facilitate energy upgrades in situations where other financing mechanisms are not appropriate. Increasing the energy usage of the existing housing stock is an extreme challenge, and in order to decrease the region's greenhouse gas emissions and to reach the city's 100% renewable energy goals, significant increases in energy efficiency are going to be necessary, and PACE financing tools simply give one more option for residents who wish to do their part to reduce energy usage and increase renewable energy production. Thank you.
Thank you. James Hamill?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. James Hamill, Managing Director with CSCDA, here for, number one, to answer any questions that you have about our program. Number two, just to clarify some issues that have been raised this afternoon. Number one, oversight or lack of oversight. This has been a program that CSCDA put in place starting in 2010. And part of that was working with all of our members, which you have been an active member for many years. And we've been around since 1988. We've issued $60 billion in debt in this state. We look out for our members. We look out for the constituents within those members and make sure that we're doing the right thing out there. So that's number one in terms of oversight. Number two, we have the ability to terminate our administrators, whether it's Renew Financial or any other administrators, on 60 days notice. If anybody's doing anything wrong, we can get rid of them. We haven't heard anything, any feedback. We've heard little things, and we've dealt with them. But we work with our administrators very closely. Number three is we are working very closely with the legislature right now. Consumer groups, I sat in a meeting for 2.5 hours 2 weeks ago at the legislature with consumer lawyers working on cleanup legislation to help the consumers out there. We realize this is not perfect right now, but it is a choice out there, and it is something that should be offered in the communities that we are serving out there. And we are working very closely to make sure that those changes and those protections are put in place on a legislative level. This is about choice. As Mr. Forer pointed out, this is not for everybody, but it is a choice in your community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think we have some questions here. Mr. White?
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your participation. The area that concerns me, one of the areas that concerns me about this, certainly, people getting in over their heads. Nobody wants that. I would imagine who's here in this room. But one way to get there, to get in over your heads, is with very high interest rates. And we were presented at least one example of a package that has interest rates, simple interest rates at 8.25% and annual rates of 9.4%. And that I would consider to be astronomical in this interest rate environment. I can appreciate in others it would be different. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about interest rates and what is this a normal number for today's kind of package, and how come so high?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think that it's twofold there. Number one is the creation of the Open PACE platform, as Mr. Forer outlined, was to create a competitive environment where you had multiple administrators out there competing against each other. The problem before was you had one or two administrators which could charge whatever interest rate they want, and in a lot of cases you saw that these were higher interest rates. Now, the key here, and Mr. Forer outlined this too, is these are fixed. So if you look at a fixed rate over 10, 15 years, if you get a HELOC or any other type of variable rate financing, it will obviously increase with that over time. We are seeing interest rates go down. We are seeing that competition come into play, and we're not seeing as many 8%. We're seeing more 7% and lower now. And looking at different ways to do that. And that's one thing that our board has pushed with our PACE providers is let's find ways to get that interest rate down. The interesting thing associated with that is one of the concerns our board had with that was because of those high interest rates, are we going to see more delinquencies out there on property tax associated with PACE financing? And for 2015 and 2016, the tax roll, we had 0.62 delinquencies, so less than 1% delinquencies. And up to this current year, as of May, we have 2% total. So about 98% of our properties that we have financed through PACE are current on their tax roll. So we're not seeing a jump in delinquencies of our entire portfolio because of those higher interest rates out there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Dominguez?
I was interested in your comment, Mr. Hamill, about the consumer lawyers that you're working with to reform the legislation. What are some of the initiatives that you're looking at, or what are some of the reforms that are on the plate?
Yes, so one of the main reforms is 100% callback, which Mr. Ford outlined is part of the current legislation. Number two is that there is recourse to the administrators if they have bad acting contractors, and I think that arises out of a lot of the newspaper articles that you've seen out there, is that if a contractor is a bad actor and injures a homeowner in some way, shape, or form, that ultimately that administrator, whether it's Renew or Hero, is responsible up to a certain point for the damage that is done to that homeowner. So there is a recourse action for that. So those are some of the key things that they're looking at right now, and they're looking at ways to protect homeowners from being put into foreclosure by these smaller type of PACE financings out there. The last thing I want to mention out there is they want to do 100% callbacks, and also looking at beyond just the equity in the property. They're looking to come up with a mechanism to actually look at the ability to pay this, so that if in the case, and I heard this question before, if in the case where you are paying a property tax of, let's say, $1,000 a year, and you're on a fixed income, and then you enter into a PACE assessment, and that becomes $2,000 or $3,000 a year, does that person at fixed income have the ability to pay that? That is being written into the legislation, that is looked at as part of the analysis for this type of financing.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, thank you for coming. So do you know what happened in Bakersfield or Kern County where there was an effort to change the PACE program or repeal it?
I really don't want to speak on that because I've heard everything third hand in respect. We have worked very closely with the city itself on this and told them what we do and how we do it and the protections that we can put in place for them. The city of Bakersfield has been receptive to that. The city has not opted out at this point. They are reviewing it at this time. The county has taken an action to opt out at a later point in time. They haven't actually opted out at this point. And in addition, we haven't seen or heard from any of our membership city or counties of calls or emails or any inquiries to us or our sponsors, CSAC or the League of Cities, saying that they want to opt out or will be opting out in the near future.
What I'm hearing is the concern is Spanish-speaking people and maybe low-income people who've been taken advantage of?
I think it goes to the point where you do have some bad apples out there and some bad actors, and that goes to what we are looking legislatively to potentially fix, is that if you do have a bad actor, if you do have a bad contractor, and you, administrator, whether it's Renew or Hero or whoever, are not taking responsibility for that, you will be taking responsibility for that, and you will be paying for that damage that is done. So if someone is damaged $10,000, $20,000, Renew Financial would pay that. And that is going to be written into legislatively on how to deal with that. So it's pushing down to, the issue has been, how do you control the contractors? Because ultimately they are at the bottom right there, and how do we push that up? And the way you push it up is you put the administrator's responsibility for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Oh, did you have another question?
Well,
Mr.
just to
White?
follow up on that. So you're saying that that this recourse concept is one that your company is working with the state legislature or supporting state legislation in the area of recourse and response?
We are, and actually Renew Financial, who Mr. Hubman was here, and Hero are working hand in hand. So the administrators are working with that too and are supportive of that, because they realize, the nice thing about all this that we have seen in our history is that no one is putting their head in the sand and saying this is perfect. They're realizing there needs to be changes made, and they are moving towards that direction.
and that the package that is being proposed here has that recourse built into it?
It does not currently. That is the legislation that is currently, it's SB 242, which is currently in the legislature. It's passed out of the Senate, and it's now moved over to the Assembly right now.
So could that not be part of the approval process here, to have that recourse as being part of the way that this package is put together for the city of Santa Barbara? I don't know who might be asking, our staff or our attorney or you. I'm asking you to begin with, and
I
broadening
can
that.
answer that question. I mean, Mr. Ford and I have talked about this. Is that's something that you could, as part of the participation agreement, that is the second step here that we brought back. That could be put in the participation agreement with the city of Santa Barbara itself.
And that would be something that your company would be agreeable to do?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Well, you got grilled pretty well, but thank you for answering all those questions. All right. That's right. All right. So it's to the council. Mr. Hart?
Well, I think that this is appropriately timed, coming after the council supported having the community shoot for 100% energy goal, and it underscores how challenging that's going to be, because the examples that we have in our staff report about the penetration in the markets in Ventura and San Luis Obispo County are in the 1.5% to 1% range, and if we're going to achieve 100% renewable energy as a community separate from the city, we're going to have to do a much better job of retrofitting existing buildings, because that is 90+% of what our built environment is going to represent going forward. So I think this is important, it's timely, and I think it opens the question for us to be thinking more aggressively in the future about how we can even make this better. But I don't think we should be waiting any longer. I think it's already 90% of the state of California has this option available. It isn't a silver bullet. There will be refinements. I'm interested in knowing if other colleagues want to change the participation agreement to include some of the things that were just talked about. And but I do want to go forward as fast as possible, because I think there are folks who would benefit from this, and this would be a useful tool.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is kind of difficult because we're in a position of being kind of the agent. So, I mean, why are we the ones to either provide the permission or restrict the ability to take on this consumer financing? And it's expensive consumer financing. It's just barely less than unsecured financing rates. And if you were to look at the rates of second mortgages, you'd be looking at a lot less money than this. So I'm not really clear on, I mean, there's two sides here. Clearly you have a lot of agencies that want to be able to make money by providing this financing. You have the real estate agencies that want to close their properties and feel there's a restriction. And I'm not clear that I'm completely satisfied that that answer that's been answered. We're kind of getting a he said, she said bit of testimony here. The other thing that bothers me is there's still a fair amount of legislation, seemingly both at all levels of government, about this issue and about consumer protections. And so while I think it's generally a good idea, and I'd like to give people the most options possible to improve their properties in whichever way they can, is it in fact too early to jump in? I'm a little curious about the Bakersfield County, the Kern County decision, why they started and why they're in, what their experience was, and why they got back out. The city's still in. You know, like you said, there may be bad apples out there, and we have to choose amongst all these apples. I'm sure we've got a good apple to choose from, but it just seems like a rather arcane system at this point in time, when there are tons of other financing options out there for consumers that I would think would be a heck of a lot cheaper than, you know, the APRs and the simple interest rates that we're looking at here. So I'm still not particularly in my comfort zone with this just yet. And I'm still, I mean, we're a city and we're not even the county, and yet we're determining what's going to happen with somebody's property tax bill. So I'm a little curious on why we're in that position to begin with as an agency. And maybe you explained it before, Mr. Ford, but I don't know if I quite got that. Can you enlighten me on that? Why this falls to these individual agencies this way as opposed to broader agencies such as counties and or states?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, it's because of the enabling legislation of AB 811. This program operates through an assessment district. It's a voluntary assessment district, where only those that opt into have this debt attached to their property taxes do so. But the creation of the assessment district has to be executed by your city council in order for it to be formed.
So you could have an assessment district within the county, as we do with property taxes, but then have an individual city within that county opt out of it.
Yes.
That still kind of doesn't make sense to me, but okay. Well, thank you, though.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the areas of, first of all, to back up the fact that the Realtors, the Association of Realtors is here in such force and also displaying the skepticism that you do, I appreciate. I think that we can even hearken back to the mortgage crisis of a decade ago and know that these financing situations can get away from us, and that it sounds like this has happened in some places in this arena. So the questions that I was raising having to do with interest rates and having to do with recourse are ones that I would want the city to be looking at. I'm willing to go ahead with this on this. It is it's a small bite at this larger task, but I think if we are able to annually look at what's happening, how many contracts, what kind of rates, do we have people that are crashing and burning around this program, how and why, that if we have that on some kind of regular monitoring basis, that would be how I'd like to try it. I don't think that a disaster would occur. I think it would be a cautious approach. We're hearing that legislation is in the works to improve this thing. I would like the recourse piece to be looked at by our staff. Is that something that perhaps our council could weigh in on? Is that something that we can require as part of this effort to go forward?
Well, the resolution in front of Councilmember White, the resolution in front of the council calls for really 3 follow-up actions by staff. The first is an assessment agreement. The second is a participation agreement. And if I understood Mr. Hamill correctly, there is room in those agreements to address the issues you're raising.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I'm cautiously supportive on that kind of basis of a chunk at a time, and then come back and look at it again in reasonable time, so that this program doesn't get away in a bad way from us. And hopefully, meanwhile, we've gotten some state legislation to tighten this up on a wider basis. And obviously, the interest rates, that's another area where I'd be looking at it, or I think that the council here annually should be looking at what kind of rates are these packages getting. So is that information that can come back? I mean, I know these are private documents in some fashion, but can we get a sense of those interest rates that are coming down out of this? I'm seeing a nod from Mr. Ford that is information.
I'm sorry, I was nodding that I understood what you were
looking
understand.
For. All right. So maybe we could, is that possible to?
Councilmember White, I think this document gives you a hint. It's dated November 2016, and the simple rate's 8.29, the APR is 9.41.
And in a year from now, with 100 of these done in the city of Santa Barbara, a council here would be able to know what those interest rates are that have been charged?
Councilmember White, I'm not sure that we would necessarily have that data readily available, or even available at all.
Okay, that would be nice, but
If you want to bring them up, you can.
We have someone coming. One of the guys coming.
The floor is yours right now.
All right, thank you. Yes, could you weigh in on that, please?
Yeah, these are all public documents, so everything is public, interest rates,
all right,
all that information. So that is the type of information we would be able to share with the city at your request. We've done it for multiple cities asking for that type of information and other information. So we can do that semi-annually, quarterly, whatever the city requests.
All right. Great. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, those pieces would help me be able to support this.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm not at all comfortable with the city getting a position to be a quasi-banking institution overwatching all this stuff. We don't have the skill nor the time nor really the need for it. It seems to me this is to some degree, a political move on the backs of people that otherwise could not afford or might not want to be able to afford, being talked into a greater loan on their property for good reasons. But the association of the Board of Realtors brought forth some just awful examples that we have to look at the worst case scenario here. There's no oversight, and I know the minute the city approves this, that the salesman's going to get on the horn and say, well, this program is city approved, and people are going to buy it for that reason, when it really has got nothing to do with it and should not be. We should not have our name attached to it. It's just not a good idea. People can get loans for these kinds of projects in a more legitimate fashion, and I think it's better that they do that. So I would urge my colleagues to reconsider and say, let's leave it to the professionals out here who have said, no, it doesn't work as well as it should. It might be able to be fixed in the future, but we have to be protective of consumers, and that's our opportunity here, and we're not doing it if we say, oh, yeah, great, go ahead. Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank everyone for coming out today, and I do believe that this is a time in history where we're talking about conserving water and conserving energy, and we did just a couple of weeks ago, thank you, Councilmember Hart, for reminding us that we set a goal of 100% renewable use in the city by 2030. And I really appreciate the realtors coming out today, and thank you for the service that you provide our community. And I know you are looking out for the homeowners, but I'm satisfied that our go slow strategy would help us make changes if we need to. I know there's predators out there, but I think there's going to be safeguards in place. And we do need to be looking at ways to boost our economy, and this seems like a tool for economic development as well as we transition to renewable energy sources. And finally, Madam Mayor, the Joint Powers Authority gives me a lot of security that we're in it with other folks. There's a lot of fine people here today, everyone, in pro and con. But I'll be voting for, I'm going to make the motion, Madam Mayor. May I at this point? Okay.
Go ahead.
I move staff recommendation A and B to get the PACE program moving.
And second by Dominguez. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez?
On that note, I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons, and there certainly are some significant concerns that we'll have to address, and it sounds like the state and D.C. are addressing them. I'm opposed to waiting for the state and D.C. to address them because we could be here for an awfully long time. And with the current greenhouse gases that are being emitted and the rising waters, we don't have the time. We're a coastal community. We need to lead the region. We need to lead the state. We need to lead the nation, and our nation needs to help hold its own around the world in terms of our ability to help solve some of the environmental problems. We're following our progressive Northern California neighbors, Lompoc. They passed this in 2014, so I think it's about time. And the advantage to retrofitting your home is so much more significant. There's so much more eco bang for your buck in terms of retrofitting rather than tearing down and rebuilding. It's just incredible. And I agree that the interest rates are high. The flip side of that coin is there's people, including in the examples that were presented to us, and I appreciate the association for bringing a lot of information and data to us. But one is an 86-year-old who didn't have the money, so they're not going to qualify for a home equity loan. They're not going to get to achieve the goals they have for their household. And some of the questions were, well, people are going to be tricked into getting things they don't need. Well, no one needs any of this stuff. there's not a single health and safety fix that this program covers. It's solar, it's water and energy retrofitting. So if we're going to not support something because people don't need it, then that doesn't make any sense. I'm not convinced. I've done consumer protection as a lawyer for several years, and so there are significant concerns, and some of the recourse I think we can take as a city, or some of the things we can encourage our nonprofits to take the lead on, is having a town hall. Maybe CEC would be interested in more than they already do with Earth Day, having a town hall where they focus particularly on energy retrofitting, because really the way to cure potential predatory or fraudulent behaviors is education and outreach. And we quite frankly haven't done enough, if we're honest, in terms of reaching out to people and letting them know what they can do. So I would really push that and work with our community development department and with nonprofits, with the Association of Realtors, anyone who wanted to come forward and help make sure that we were getting the most bang for our buck. I think that's the way to go. So I'm definitely in support of this.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that Councilmember Rio include a report back to council after 6 months following the start of the program, and then to have staff work with the CSCDA on some additional language that could be included in the participation agreement that would mirror some of the provisions in the state law. I know they're supporting the state legislation. Having some of that language in our participation agreements just seems like a belt and suspenders protection that would get to some of the concerns that Councilmember White spoke to. And I hope they would add that. The maker and the seconder of the motion would just add those two elements to their motion.
Okay, so a report back, Madam Mayor, in 6 months. Mr. Four, is that supportable?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rio, absolutely.
Very good.
And then the other part would be to have our participation agreements include the components that are in the proposed state legislation that would provide additional consumer protections.
Very good. Mr. Dominguez, are you amenable?
You okay with those two?
I'm happy with that. I kind of assumed staff was working on it, and just as a practical matter, this is going to take several months before any of this happens. We still have to wait for the county to approve it. The language you're going to come back with in the participation agreement, it's going to be months. So I'm not sure if 6 months might be optimistic.
I heard it was 6 months after it was actually implemented.
The first person signs up?
Yeah, or
okay.
After the program's ready to go. So
another option is we could cut this off after 250.
No, we're not going there. Yeah, don't even.
Let's just stop right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I can't turn off individual mics. I can't. Yeah. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One daunting term I kept hearing from a few folks today was legislation pending. And this is an item that is evolving. It's evolving on a lot of levels. I don't think for any moment, no matter what we do, this city is not impeding environmental progress or environmental retrofits. I mean, we are moving forward on stuff. For the individual consumer, I mean, there's very few things in your life that's scarier than when you go into escrow on a home. Nothing more arcane, nothing more complicated that is daunting. And I think if you are in a position where you want to do this because you're really not able to qualify for that home equity loan, as Mr. Dominguez was talking about, this isn't probably what you should be doing either. And that happens to a lot of folks. And a lot of people in this country are in pretty bad shape with their credit cards and some of the other debt. So, and as a city of Santa Barbara, as Mr. Hotchkiss was pointing out, acting as some kind of either a decider or a financial agent, I think we're out of our skill set. And we have this desire in this state and this city to do these improvements and retrofits, and we give tax credits. We do a lot of different things to make these things happen. In some cases, overriding legislation where they can go into our neighborhoods whether we want them or not. So it's not like we're putting the brakes on these things, but I'm not sure this cake is totally baked yet. I think there's some more stuff coming up that's going to put a lot more people in their comfort zone. There's this lust to move forward, but I'm not ready to approve it. So I'm going to reserve my vote on this one.
Okay. Before I know Mr. White, your light's on, I'll just say I think given the extra direction, which I think was already planned by staff to do, but now you've heard loud and clear the council's also interested in some of those protection pieces when for the participation agreement. That's going to be very important, and to monitor this. And people need to go into this with eyes wide open, and we are providing an option, not a mandate. And I think that is a key point that I know was brought up before, but I think worth repeating. So, Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I had raised the question, and it sounds like in a general term that the instructions of this motion address it, and that is the term recourse. I mean, they getting recourse to the from the contractor, is that the term, to the administrator, is that would those be the terms of art to use here? And that's what we're making sure that we are building into our effort. Is that I'm seeing?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, I haven't reviewed a draft of a participation agreement, so I'm not sure where it would plug in or how it would plug in, but I do understand the concept. So
okay, and
if it's doable,
and that would be part of what I'm supporting, is that notion of recourse is certainly being looked at before it comes back to us, and with the effort of maximizing that recourse in any legislation that we create.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, the only way I can see to implement that is to bring the agreement back to you. So to the extent you're asking for an amendment along the lines that Councilmember Hart described, you can read Section 4, Paragraph 1 of the resolution and Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the resolution to qualify the staff's authority to execute those agreements. So we don't have full authority to execute those agreements. We have authority to attempt to negotiate them to a place that meets your direction. And if we can do that, we can execute. If we can't, we'll be back to you.
Okay. There's that. Okay, that's one. And then number two is that I was asking about the interest rates and having some kind of report back to council in concept on a regular basis, whether it's let's say annual is the obvious one, just what's happening with this program, how is it doing, and to have that report back on an annual basis, I think would be important. So that is part. Would the maker of the motion include that as part of the package?
I'm wondering if we could do that during the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council, and that would be a way to bring
that was
it
what
back.
I suggested. That's what one of the first things I said was have it come back 6 months after the program begins.
Yeah, that's part of the
report
motion.
to council. So that is part of the motion.
Okay, 6 months. I'm just talking about as a part
I think
of
after that,
an
then
annual
we
At
can
that
decide
point, the
how
council
often to
can
come
certainly-
back. But the first step would be after 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we're good? All right. All right, we have a motion from Murillo, second from Dominguez. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. Okay, that's 5-2 with Rouse and Hotchkiss opposed. All right, well, thank you very much for that robust conversation. And what don't we do? Yeah, let's move on to item 16.
Item 16, Stage 3 drought update.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is Kelly Dyer. I am presenting the Stage 3 drought update today. And we will be discussing the status of the drought, our water demands, and our water supply drought funding. And then we will be recommending council action at the end of the presentation. I do recognize we're short on time today, so I will be trying to keep this brief. If there's anything,
I'm sorry, could someone close the doors out there, please? Thank you.
If there's anything that needs further explanation, just let me know. This is a chart that's produced by NOAA. It is our drought monitor, and the drought has improved. In fact, it's over for most of the state, but in our area, we still remain in a drought. And even within our county, I wanted to just point out that local conditions can vary. So in some parts of our county, the drought has subsided. In the South County area, we remain in a stage 3 drought declaration with 30% conservation target. That's similar with the other South Coast agencies. This is a chart of Kachuma's storage. The black line is the current drought. And so you can see with the rainfall this spring, the reservoir is about half full. It basically rewound the clock a few years back to 2014, which was when the drought really started becoming serious. The green line is the last major drought, 86 to 93 period. And I think it's really interesting to see how closely the storage level tracked with where we were in the last drought. Things have changed. This time around, we had more releases for fish. Those were not a requirement in the last drought. And this drought was much more severe. It was the worst drought in record. So I think we did pretty well with managing the water levels given those circumstances. This is our water demands. And so the water demands for the month of April were 40% below pre-drought demands, and our 12 months running average is a 38% reduction. So even though we did change, we revised the conservation target to be 30% this spring, our community is still conserving, which is a good thing for water supply. It is something that we need to consider for water rates, which is the next item on the agenda. I wasn't surprised to see that the conservation had not rebounded. This chart is our historical water use going back to the 1980s. So here we are today, which is about at the same point as the low point for water demands in the last drought. And even after water use restrictions were lifted, demands did not rebound immediately. It was somewhat of a slow growth over several years, and ultimately they never returned to what they were before the drought because people had made permanent changes in their water use. And I think that will be the case again in this drought. This is our current water supply strategy. We're currently in year 6 of the drought. This drought began really when Kachuma stopped spilling. The last spill was in May of 2011. So our water supply for this year is based on the 30% conservation target. A portion of our water is from desal, the green. We have a portion of our water from the State Water Project imported water, which is orange. We have had some groundwater earlier this year. Our wells are now shut down. And the light blue bar is our Gibraltar water, which is a significant portion of our water supply this summer. And then the dark blue is Kachuma. We're holding off on using our Kachuma allocation and planning to carry it over for use next year. And then the purple bar is our recycled water. So Gibraltar is currently at about 97% of capacity. It did stop spilling in May. We're currently maximizing our diversions up to our water rights, and the water quality has been good. Kachuma is about half full, and fish releases have resumed. They're at about 4 acre-feet per day the last time I checked. And we did receive a 40% allocation for this water year from the Bureau of Reclamation. And then the new water year begins October of 2017, and we expect to receive an additional 40% allocation at that time. Not all the water stored in Kachuma is project water, which is why we received a smaller allocation this year. This chart is produced by the county, and I wasn't going to go through the details on it. The point is there are a number of accounts, water accounts, and the accounting is somewhat complicated for Kachuma. Our project water is this very top bar. This is our 40% allocation that we received. The remaining unallocated project water is the next bar down, which is when that's going to play into the 40% allocation we'll receive in October of 2017. We do have some state water that's stored in the lake, but the majority of what's in here is reserved for other accounts. Downstream water rights and fish releases, the minimum pool, and evaporation. And I will be bringing this chart back in future updates to talk more about this. So you'll see this again, and we can get into some of the more detailed information behind it. Imported water, state water deliveries have been delivered to Kachuma at maximum capacity. All the water agencies are really trying to move water from San Luis to Kachuma as much as possible. San Luis is pretty full and at risk of spilling again next year. We currently have about 2,200 acre-feet stored in Kachuma and 3,800 acre-feet in San Luis. We're projected to have 1,800 acre-feet remaining in San Luis at the end of this calendar year. Because of the risk of spill next year, our strategy has changed compared with previous years in the drought. This year, we're only going to carry over about 900 acre-feet of that water to next year, which is about how much we can deliver within a few months, assuming a spill occurs in March. The remainder, we would like to repay some of our debt, our water debt that we owe to AVEC. The city currently has about 6,200 acre-feet of water debt that's owed to AVEC. That's a pretty substantial amount of water for the city, considering our total demands for 1 year, about 9,000. And so we'd like to get some of this off the books this year. We have an opportunity. AVEC has said that they can take return of about 2,000 acre-feet per month, starting in July, going through December. And so we're working to return about 2,900 acre-feet. That would reduce our debt to about 3,300. In order to do that, we are pursuing the purchase of 2,000 acre-feet of supplemental water, which I'll be discussing more on the next slide.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I had a question. Is AVEC the only entity that we owe water back to?
Councilmember Hart, that's correct.
So that's the total water debt right there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Part of our agreements with AVEC included a provision that we would pay the conveyance costs to get the water over to them. That's estimated at about $250 an acre foot. So in order to return 2,900, we'd have to pay about $725,000. That is budgeted in the drought fund. We have $2 million for these purposes. That is budgeted to cover those costs. So the city of Santa Maria have approached the city of Santa Barbara with an opportunity for water purchase. They have excess water supply. Their imported water exceeds their demand, and they have 4,000 acre-feet available for purchase. Montecito's interested in 2,000, and we're interested in the other 2,000 in order to pay off some of that AVEC water debt. We've negotiated a price of $225 per acre foot, so that would be a total purchase cost of $450,000. There's no return obligation to City of Santa Maria. They are a member agency of Central Coast Water Authority. So this would be an internal transfer within CCWA. And again, we have sufficient budget for it. Santa Maria City Council will consider this item today as well. So we're both going to be requesting authorization, and if both are approved, then we would move forward with the transfer. We are posting a CEQA notice of exemption upon approval by council. Our existing agreements with CCWA all allow for the transfer of water among participants of the CCWA State Water Project participants. So this is something that's already part of our existing agreement. That's why it's a notice of exemption. Our groundwater basins are currently resting. We are maximizing our use of Gibraltar Reservoir, which allowed us to rest the basins. They're at historic lows, currently at about 30% of capacity. So we do have some water left in the basins if there's a need to turn the wells back on, if the drought continues or one of our other sources goes down. That is still a resource that has some remaining yield. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hagmark for the rest of the presentation.
Madam Mayor, council members, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager. I wanted to give you an update on the recycled water treatment facility. We just finished the modifications to that facility. And as of yesterday, they started their 14-day operational test. I hope in July we'll be able to report that we've gotten the facility up to its design production, which is the 2.5 million gallons a day. And as you are aware, the city is pursuing legal action to try and recoup some of the costs that we have spent to make those modifications to get the facility up to where it needs to be. The desal project, as of May 30th, the plant started putting water into the system. It has been operating intermittent as they continue to work through startup issues. It's, as you can imagine, a very complicated system, and it has alarms that will shut down the system anytime that there's some pressure irregularity and changes. And so they continue to work through those. They have started the acceptance testing. It requires that they run for a complete 24 hours to get credit for that full day of acceptance, and they have to have 14 days of that. So they are not done with the acceptance testing yet and continuing to work through issues there. I'm hopeful we'll have some type of completion here in early July, just based on the progress they've been making. It looks pretty good. As far as public outreach, we've done quite a bit to try and get information out to the community. It is difficult for those people who are asking how this is going to change their water. It is going to change throughout the year and throughout the day, depending on where you are in the city. We've tried to put some information showing people just on a daily basis how much it might fluctuate. We are not doing tours right now. There's a lot of activity still at the plant, but we anticipate once we've completed the acceptance testing, we'll start to schedule something. We thought something maybe late summer would be applicable, but we do want to certainly get people in there to see and learn how it works. And I have some fantastic news today. We finally have heard back on the Proposition 1 funding for desal. And I just have to, Senator Jackson really came through for us. We have been working now for 2 years to try and get access to this funding, which we knew was available when we awarded the desal project. There was roughly $100 million set aside for desal in California. And the voters of Santa Barbara turned out, I think it was over 60% support of Proposition 1, because we saw that money being very helpful to help offset some of these costs for drought. And unfortunately, the initial guidelines that DWR came out with were going to exclude us because we had moved too quickly to get our project online. And fortunately, Senator Jackson was very effective in persuading them to open their eligibility dates. And so at this point, we are open to participate now, and we will be putting together a package. Our grant application is due September 1st. I expect this grant application will be in excess of 1,000 pages. It'll be a very extensive application, but we are working on that, and we're looking at up to $10 million for construction, and there's potentially other pockets of money for feasibility studies, which we did. So I'm really hopeful we'll be able to secure this and really help offset some of the significant costs of this drought. And that brings us to our recommendation today, which is approve and authorize the Public Works Director to execute a water purchase contract with the City of Santa Maria.
Thank you. I don't see any public comment speaker slips. I also have to emphasize that our State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson was dogged in her process and making sure those guidelines would include us to compete. I mean, it's no guarantee that we'll get the money, but to at least be able to compete, and multiple conversations back and forth. And I want to appreciate her staff very much. And I know I've been working with you on a regular basis. And I don't know if this is part of the next item probably be worth asking. I'll ask it now, and maybe as you get into the next item, you can answer. But if we were to get a $10 million loan to help offset some of these costs for the desalination plant, what does that do to rates? I mean, I guess the short answer is it means you don't have to raise them as much as you normally would, or, so just, I'll reserve that for the next item, since we're talking about rates in the next item, but she really came through, so I just want to acknowledge that. Yeah. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I make the motion for the staff recommendation, I want to comment that a couple of things. One is that this Prop 1 also was part of the package of requests, recommendations that all of the water agencies in the county made to the state. Is that not the case?
No, this is a little different from that.
This was different than that. Okay.
That was, we were seeking funding from the Office of Emergency Services. They have another grant monies available, so this is separate.
Okay. So that I thought that it was part of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, that this purchase from Santa Maria is a good thing. I can tell you that the city of Santa Barbara stepped up to support Santa Maria's purchasing of the table. What is that?
Suspended Table A.
Suspended Table A water. So that was a county-wide collaboration element in the midst of this drought. And this purchase is within the county of Santa Barbara. In my view, the moving of water and the marketing of water back and forth is one of the ways that efficiencies really can be generated, and this was an excellent step in collaboration within our county. So good for our team for having participated, and that we have the goodwill to work with the city of Santa Maria to make this happen.
So would you like to?
So I'll make that motion for the staff recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, motion by White, second by Hotchkiss. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you. And then item 17.
Item 17, proposed water rates for fiscal years 2018, 2019, and 2020.
Madam Mayor, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here today to seek your approval to send out a 3-year rate notice for our water rates in accordance with Prop 218. This notice was unanimously supported by the Water Commission, and as you all know, the last few years have required some difficult increases as a result of this unprecedented drought. Fortunately, making those timely and steady rate increases have put the city in a position right now where we require only modest increases to most of our customer classes. I do want to acknowledge that last year at this time, Council from the dais added an additional financial support to water resources that was dearly needed. And Mr. Hamilton is here because of that, and he has been an immense bonus to the team and has really come through on this. These rates are a lot of work. He's also going to be helping us out with that grant application. But he has done some tremendous work putting this together, and I think you'll appreciate his presentation today. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Today, as the title sheet says, we'll be going through proposed water rates for fiscal years 2018, 2019, and 2020. As the outline, I'd like to start with the rate study background, some of the parameters of the study and the assumptions that went into it. We'll look quickly at the financial plan and our projected reserve balances. Then we will go through the proposed rates, and we'll turn to look at some of the rate comparison examples, so how the rates are changing monthly bills for our single-family residences, and also where our bills lie within our neighboring agencies or how they compare there. After that, we'll look at the adoption schedule, and we'll be looking for council action to set a public hearing date and also direct staff to send out a public notice. We had contracted with Bartle Wells Associates in November 2016 to develop multi-year rates, and those would be based on the cost of service principles in accordance with Prop 218. We did the multi-year rates for a couple reasons, one of which is we wanted to set expectations for the community and give them something, some stability there, but also some outside financial agencies like our bond rating agencies view us as having less financial risk if we have multi-year rates adopted. Also, the rates were to meet the California Water Efficiency Partnership requirements, such that no more than 30% of our revenue would come from our fixed monthly meter charges. Previously, it was called the California Urban Water Conservation Council. They condensed their name, but the same requirements. And also that the rates would be consistent with council policies, that we'd meet the reserve requirements, and also that we'd be allocating the water sources based on the priority levels as set by council. Also, as we discussed through our budget meetings, we are looking to have a rate design so that we would have an 8% increase in revenues in fiscal year 18, and that was designed so that we'd meet our debt coverage ratio, and then also that we'd have 6% increases in our revenues in 19 and 20, and that's more geared towards, and you'll see later, to stabilize our reserve balance. So I'd like to briefly go through some of the major assumptions in the water rate study, first of which is that the drought would continue through FY19 and then be ending in FY20. So the winter of 1920 is when it would end, but most of FY20 would still be in a drought in the model. Also, for conservation expectations, that we will gradually be increasing our consumption in the model to meet a 30% conservation target in FY19. So it's not that we jump immediately back to that 30%, it builds up over time. And then in FY20, we will see a 3% bump in consumption based on the model. So quickly here, I'd like to focus on this middle section. What we've done is design those rates in the 8% revenue and 6% in 19 and 20, is we have a planned drawdown of our reserves. In the slide after this, I'll show you where we project our reserve balance to end. But we do have a planned revenue imbalance, so we'll have more expenditures than revenue in 18 and 19. And then we see some of our operating costs decrease as we reduce the drought-related expenses in 20, and we add back to our reserves and begin to stabilize. Ultimately, we'll be using approximately $6.25 million in reserves in FY18, about $5 million in FY19, and adding about $1.25 million in FY20 to our reserves. So here's a chart of our projected reserves balance. The blue bars are what we think we'll have at the end of each fiscal year, and the red line on the chart there is what council policy will be for us. So we project to end FY17 above council policy, and then like I had mentioned, in FY18 and 19 we have a planned reduction in reserves, and then we'll add a little bit to our reserves in FY20, and we think we'll be approximately $1 million below council policy in FY20. One of the other things we have to be mindful of is that we have, in our debt requirements, we have to maintain a coverage ratio of 1.25 times on our parity debt. So our net operating revenues have to be 1.25 times our annual debt service. The table on there on the screen shows you what we're projecting to have in terms of our coverage ratio in fiscal years 18, 19, and 20. So we've planned for 1.45 in 18. Not much of a change in 19, and then we begin to recover again in FY20. So before I go through each individual rates, I'd like to give you a couple little highlights. What we're seeing is in the model, as we gradually increase consumption, we are actually able to lower some of our volumetric rates in the different tiers. And what we're still meeting our sales estimates due to the increased consumption. We're also seeing consistent but stable increases in the fixed monthly meter charges. We're still continuing to receive 30% of the revenue in the fixed charges. In that there are certain categories, though, due to the cost of service analysis, that will be seeing minimal increases. So irrigation, Tier 1 for parks, recreation, and schools will be seeing increases in the 3 years. The commercial industrial, Tier 1 will also be seeing increases, and recycled water will be seeing increases as well. What we've been able to do, though, with our rate consultant is that instead of having, in any given year, a large jump in the rates, we are able to phase those in through the 3-year rate period so they don't see any large increase in 1 year. So I'd like to go through these, and I'll try to be as quick as possible, but I would like to touch on each individual class and tier. For our single-family residents, what we're seeing across all tiers, and these are for our volumetric rates, is we are going to be lowering the per HCF charge. So in Tier 1, we'll be going from $4.56 to $4.44 and holding that flat for 3 years. And this is a theme that you'll see in many of the other classes and tiers, is that we tried to keep them as flat if possible for the 3 years. In Tier 2, we're moving from $12.97 down a penny to $12.96, holding that flat. And in Tier 3, we're moving from $24.27 to $23.98, again, flat through FY20. The multifamily residence has the same rate structure, Tiers 1, 2, and 3, as single-family residence. Again, they're decreasing and being held flat through FY20. As I mentioned in the previous slide, commercial industrial is seeing some increases, but we were able to phase the rates in and still meet the cost of service over 3 years. Tier 2, like the other tiers, is seeing a slight decrease, going from $23.94 to $23.91, and holding flat through FY20. For our irrigations accounts and recycled water, like the previous screen, we are able to lower some of these classes and tiers rates in FY18 and hold them flat. So starting here with the residential and commercial irrigation, they'll be moving down from $12.97 to $12.96, 1 penny, and hold flat. Tier 2 will be $24.27, going down to $23.98. Again, the same throughout through FY20. Moving here to Tier 1, we do see some increases for irrigation for recreation, parks, and schools. They have consistent increases starting at $4.11 in FY18 and being increased to $4.88 in FY20. Tier 2, like our other higher tiers in other classes, going down just slightly from $24.27 to $23.98 and remaining the same through FY20. The agriculture Tier 1 sees a decrease from $3.42 to $3.01, flat through FY20, and Tier 2, $24.27 down to $23.98, again, the same through FY20. Oh, let me back up. Recycled water, like some of those other classes, that we are able to phase in their rate increases, so there's not a large increase, and they raise up from $3.02 to $4.40 through FY20. This is a table of some of our meter sizes and the fixed monthly charges. I don't intend to go through these individually like I had just done for volumetric rates, but most of them are seeing increases each year from about 5 to 6%. There are some other larger meter sizes that aren't shown on the screen, but those are also just consistent increases through the 3 years. We are proposing one new fee this year, and it's an auxiliary master meter fee. So there's certain situations and physical constraints on multifamily residential properties and developments. So typically we'll put the meters in the right-of-way, but that's not always possible. So sometimes we have to put a private city-owned sub-meter on the private property and do an easement such that we can read the meters. We'll then place a master meter at the front of the property at the right-of-way, and we can better account for water that way. This is a new fee. It's minimal in terms of our budget. I think we'll have approximately 10 master meters that fall into this category, and it'll generate about $9,000 annually. So here we're going to show some potential projected impacts to single-family residential bills. We have 3 different columns. There's low users, or 4 HCF per month, moderate or high for 10 HCF and 20 HCF. What we're seeing in FY18, and the line that says change there represents the increase, or for our high users, a slight decrease. But if you continue to use 4 HCF, your bill would go up approximately 2%. If you're using a moderate amount of water, it's about 0.5%. And for high water users, they would actually see just a almost imperceptible decrease in their water bill. FY19 sees an increase of about 3.5% for our low water users, about 1% for moderate, and 0.5% for high. And again, very similar for FY20. These charts here, I'm going to go through 3 quick charts that show where City of Santa Barbara lies with their neighboring agencies in terms of these water use.
The last slide, please.
Yes.
So it seems like the lowest water users are facing the highest increase. That seems like counterintuitive.
Right, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, what we're seeing there is that we're having these 5 or 6% increases in the fixed monthly charges, and those, because they use only 4 HCF, it's more weighted towards that 5 or 6% increase.
Are there any measures you can take to mitigate that impact?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, at this point, no. I mean, we have to cover the cost of service. We're not allowed to subsidize by classes, and so there's no way that you can move costs to different categories.
Within the same tier, though, you could change the fixed rate versus the volumetric rate?
No.
Why is that?
Because you'd then be shifting costs around. I mean, what you're getting back to is you're talking about moving, instead of having 30% of our costs be fixed, you're talking about lowering that fixed charge and moving it into a variable. Is that
correct?
Your question? We could do that, but then we start to get into this situation again where if we start doing it for one class, we got to do it for the other classes. And then you start to move more of your 80% of our costs are fixed. And it's already challenging, and I think we want to try and stabilize our rates by having as much as we can in the fixed. But if we do that, we start to get into a situation where we could have more variability with our rates depending on how usage comes out.
Well, I'm okay with variability because we can deal with that over time, and we have the reserves, which acts as a buffer. But what concerns me is the impact on our working class and our non-working poor. This is it may seem modest, isolated, but if you're talking about $60 a year increase by the end of the term, you know, they're getting hit with the sales tax increase potentially of a penny. Gas tax is going up 17 cents. Edison is going up 3% or so. Our wastewater is going up 6% for the next, I think, 10 years. I mean, these people who are really paying the highest fixed fees as a percentage are really getting hammered everywhere. So I understand that there's value in reducing the variability and maximizing the fixed rate up to the 30% that the commission allows. But is there a way to tone it down just a little bit?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, I guess we could sit there and play around with it. I don't know how much it would really change it because you'd just be shifting it to a variable cost that we need to bring in. Other options out there, you can use basically non-rate revenue to offset those costs. So if you wanted to use general fund money for that particular category, that's a potential use as well. I don't know that we could shift dramatically those costs around. I think what you'll find in the next slide, to kind of put it in context, is although it is going up, the city has the lowest costs for our low users, and I know that's it's based on the cost of service, but that's for us comes out to be the lowest here. So I think we have done a lot over the years to try and protect our low users.
Well, and that's laudable. I really appreciate that, particularly in one of your previous slides you showed that our water users are conserving 38%. So it's a great showing by our residents. But I think I'd love to see if you could come back with some numbers. What if you were to take that first category, the low users, the change is 2.1%. How much of an impact would it be to make that 1.1%? So to drop these numbers, the 2.1, the 3.4, and the 3.5 by 1 percentage point. I imagine because these are the lowest tiers, that would have the least impact on your current system.
I think it's something we'd have to look at, Councilmember Dominguez, with the rate consultant. I can't be sure right now that it would actually help, that you may just be shifting cost to a different component of the volumetric charge. So the volumetric charge isn't just your per unit cost. There's also a delivery charge in there as well as a peaking cost. So I can't be sure at this moment that would particularly help them. In fact, it may just swing the balance over to volumetric rate increase.
Councilmember Dominguez, one of the things that with this notice is this would be the high end of what the council could adopt, but we could come back with something presumably lower. We can look at this some more and see if there's any opportunities for it, and we could ultimately adopt something lower at the public hearing. But this right here would be, I think what we'd be proposing is the highest. And we can take a look at other options associated with that.
The secondary benefit of reducing the proportion of the fixed rate to the variable rate is it causes people to conserve more. So if we ultimately want people to be conserving resources, that actually encourages them. So that would be a second reason for taking a close look. Thank you.
Why don't you finish your presentation, and then we have a public comment speaker slip too.
Okay. As Mr. Hagmark had noted, we're looking at our comparison to other agencies nearby at 4 HCF use or low water use in a month. And Santa Barbara, and this has been the theme in the last few years, is on the low side, if not the lowest. Now, as we move into moderate use, we're right in the pack with our neighboring agencies. And for high use, we have the highest water rates amongst our neighboring agencies. Looking at the rate adoption schedule, we're here today presenting the proposed rates. We will be looking for direction to mail public notices notifying customers of changes. Hopefully have those in the mail on June 27th. We are looking to set a public hearing date for August 15th. And we'll be doing the public hearing and adoption. And then in late September, customers will begin to see those impacts in their bills.
Thank you. Why don't we hear from Denise Adams? Why don't you come on up?
Thank you. On behalf of the public, we'd like to know when and where the city's water rate study will become available to us. The amount of the rates that we currently have is a concern and remains a concern to us under Proposition 218, and I think the city is going to open itself up for some potential litigation. Your high-end users, as you just saw, pay the highest amount. We pay 52% more than the people right under us. We pay 532% more than your 0 to 4% users. So I again want to remind the council that when you have tiered water rate structures that deviate from the cost to serve the customers, and as Mr. Hagemark pointed out, you cannot cross-subsidize. There's a fixed cost of overhead that's applicable to all customers. You're in violation of Proposition 218. And so the local governments, again, who do choose not to comply are subject to litigation. And so, again, our concern is for people who are residential customers and have families or have yards, live in large lots, or live in high fire areas that are designated or in landslide areas and must, by your orders, maintain landscaping as per your specifications, and then to come back and we're paying 532% more than your 0 to 4% users. There's a cost to serve all your customers. So we certainly encourage Mr. Hagemark, whether your fixed costs, which are 80%, are spread over all your customers, and your volume charges, we hope you will again revisit, because we do not understand historically why we pay 532 cents more, and I appreciate that your proposed rates are going to save us 29 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public hearing portion. I'll go back to my question from the last item that I know that application is not due for Prop 1 funding till September 1st. This process, the rates would be already set, but if we should get a $10 million grant to cover some of the costs associated with the desalination plant, how does that relate to rates moving forward?
Madam Mayor, the way that the noticing process works, we would be establishing the maximum rate increases that we could do. Should we be successful at securing that $10 million, the council will have a decision on how best to use that money. And it could be put towards reducing some of our debt requirements, and in that way we could defer doing the rate increase that we had noticed for 19, or do something less without having to renotice.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, or a motion, or questions, or to the council? Mr. White, and then Ms. Maria.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate Mr. Dominguez's line of questioning. I've certainly gone through that many times over the last 30 years, and I appreciate that staff was able to actually lower some of the variable charges this time. And also, we were truing up this year. We've had some real trouble with the accuracy of our rate studies and such, and we've gotten ourselves, I think, trued up at this point. And I'm supportive of the staff recommendation. I appreciate that Mr. Hagmark indicates we can come back, and there may be some opportunities to lower rates, but that these would be the maxima. So I would move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Maria?
That was it?
Oh,
Second.
that was it. Okay. I thought you had a comment. Mr. Dominguez?
I would echo Mr. White's comments that staff has been exceptional in keeping the price and cost contained. So I'm just asking you to be truly, truly exceptional.
Madam Mayor.
Going up to 11, as it may be.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, I do want to interject because I don't want to set a false expectation here in terms of what we can do between noticing these rates and adopting them. These rates will set the maximum we can adopt, both for the meter charge as well as for the volumetric. So neither of those can go up. They've been, as you can see, they've been designed to recover not our full operating costs for the next year, but to actually have a $6.5 million use of reserves. And the following year, it's $11 million over 2 years. So if we reduce revenue from any of these rate classes or any of these rate buckets, essentially, we will be increasing the use of reserves. We will look at it, and if there's something creative that we've missed that still falls within cost of service, we will certainly revisit that at time of adoption. But I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation that we are going to be able to achieve the revenues we think we need, as well as reduce costs at this point in time with this rate notice. I will say that throughout, the highest priority has been to allocate our resources in a way that gives our lowest costs to our most needy customer classes. We've designed our customer classes in a manner that supports that, which is the health and safety use for the tier 1 through 4. We have very little that differs between types of service, but our supplies are one of the places that we can, because of our diverse supply, really be careful of how our resources are used within our community to try and help those who have less resources. And so I wanted to just make sure that there was an expectation that we can make wholesale changes to this and still achieve the revenues that we're going to need to keep the water agency solvent.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was responding to my comment, or was that just a general point?
It was being careful to not set an expectation for you that we would be able to significantly deviate from the rates that
So you were responding to my...
That's correct,
okay.
Yes.
And I'm not asking you to reduce revenue, so I'm not sure if you heard me or understood what I was trying to say. What I was suggesting is we rebalance the fixed rate and the volumetric rate. So you have a certain revenue expectation you're trying to generate, and I understand that. And like I said, you guys have been exceptional in doing what you're doing. And I know it's not your fault that Edison is raising its rates, and Southern Cal Gas is raising its rates, and wastewater is raising its rates, and we're hitting people with a gas tax and a sales tax. You guys are not at all responsible for that. But that's the environment that our poorest residents are living with. And Ms. Adams raised a good point, and I'm glad that she's here. You know, we've had a dozen speakers in the last year on water, and she's been 13 of them. So I'm glad that she's here making points, because we should have more community participation here, and I'm not sure why they're not here. But there are households out there, even in the low tier, where you have multiple working class residents who are paying the higher tier rates. So there's still a lot more we can do, and we haven't even gotten into that.
Okay. We do have a motion on the table. We know what it is. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. We took 18 off for a future date, and we're going to take a little break and then get to item number 19. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to call the City Council meeting back to order. If we could read item number 19.
Item 19, marijuana policy discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. Yeah, who's taking this item? Here we
Madam Mayor, Andrew Bermond, project planner from the
sorry about that, Mr. Bermond.
Development Department. And with me I have the Assistant City Attorney, Theo Ostrander, and your new Public Engagement Manager, Anthony Wagner, who will also be available to help us walk through this rather complicated topic. But I just want to go over briefly what staff's presentation will contain. We'll start with the regulatory framework because it's pretty complicated. There's also some legislation that may change things further this week or next. Then we'll walk briefly through each of the marijuana business categories. Staff has included in the presentation some considerations. These are not recommendations. If you were to take action on all of them, we'd end up with a mess of a law anyway. So, but they're to sort of stimulate discussion. And then I'll also get into a little bit of concerns about the non-commercial marijuana uses and financial considerations that all of these choices that are available to the city have. So we'll start with the regulatory framework. We have, as I said, a complicated policy framework. The federal government prohibits the use of marijuana. The state government has begun a number of different regulatory policies to address it. And locally, we have an accommodation for medical marijuana storefront collectives, which follows an older model in state law regarding the use of medical marijuana for qualified patients. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that the federal government still prohibits the use of marijuana. It's banned by the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. The federal government is not enforcing this at a local level generally because of the memo that was issued by James Cole a number of years ago, Assistant Attorney General, who characterized the use and sale of marijuana as a state concern, and where it was legal to use in that state, it would be local law enforcement's job to deal with that. That's not an act of Congress, and frankly, the federal government could change their position on that at any time. State regulations changed dramatically with the passage of Prop 215 in 1996. That was the Compassionate Use Act. That approved medical marijuana, but it lacked a mechanism for legal possession. You had the right to use it as a drug, but if you were prescribed by your doctor, but it wasn't really a mechanism to acquire it. In 2003, the Medical Marijuana Program Act created the marijuana cultivation collective model that the city's ordinance follows. Then in 2015, MRSA, which is now the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, was passed that defined a licensing program for a number of different marijuana business categories, which the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, Prop 64, mirrored a number of those, and we'll discuss those in a little bit. And it also then established an individual adult right to consume marijuana privately. On the city side, we still have our medical marijuana dispensaries, Municipal Code Chapter 2880. It establishes 5 zones where each could contain 1 collective, but there's no more than 3 citywide. As for non-medical business, that is prohibited in the city under interim ordinance number 5763. It was a temporary measure until September 5th of 2018. Also, in last year's election, the voters passed Measure D, which is the Santa Barbara Marijuana Control Act, that authorized City Council to levy an up to 20% excise tax. As I mentioned a little bit, there's also pending legislation that was approved by the legislature as part of the budget package that was sent to Governor Brown. That is the SB 94, called the Cannabis Trailer Bill. It would merge basically the MCRSA and AUMA licensing programs, prescribe how taxes would be collected, and consolidate oversight to a single Bureau of Cannabis Control. It also removes the word marijuana from state law, preferring the term cannabis. So I'll get into the different categories now. We follow it from seed to sale, as they say. Beginning with cultivation, we'll go through manufacturing, testing, distribution, transportation, and then the dispensary retail use. I've got a little flow chart here that illustrates how this is intended to operate. The marijuana plant is grown by a cultivator. Then a transporter will take it either to a distributor or to a manufacturer for processing. Once it's at the distributor, a portion of it is collected and sent to a third-party tester. Then a transporter takes it again from the distributor to the dispensary, where it is then either dispensed to the customer on site or delivered through a delivery vehicle to an address. So we'll begin with cultivation. There are 13 cultivation licenses that will be issued starting next year. I won't get into the eccentricities of all of them, but generally they're small, medium, large, and then in 5 years we'll have an extra large. And then they're further divided into the type of grow, whether they're indoor, outdoor, or a mixed light combination. Now, the city has a number of options with respect to cultivation. We, as a city, can restrict the cultivation to certain zones, prohibit or allow certain license types but not others. For example, allowing only indoor or only small scale, or we can also completely prohibit the commercial cultivation. However, doing so is one of the three measures that disqualifies the city from pursuing AUMA grant funding, which I'll discuss more later. If the city wishes to regulate cultivation rather than prohibit or allow outright, then we would need to consider what criteria or performance standards we would be looking for with respect to security, odor, or other nuisances. Next in the pipeline is manufacturing. There's two types of manufacturing at the moment. There's using volatile solvents and using non-volatile solvents. The difference between the two is, whether the solvent that's used to extract the THC is combustible, and typically the non-volatile solvents are it's a more expensive operation, but it also results in a product that has a higher commercial value. So with manufacturing, similarly, we have the option as a local agency to restrict to one or both or neither licenses, and also we can incorporate security, aesthetic, or other nuisance criteria as performance standards. Then next in the pipeline is the independent testing. This is done to certify the THC content. It is also to test for contaminants or impurities that could be harmful to the customer. The testers are barred from holding any other license. They're meant to be independent third parties. There's no testing your own product. So when these licenses begin to be issued in early 2018, we'll have then all products from that issuance date forward will be subject to having some marking that indicates that they've completed testing. Now, the city, this is kind of binary. We can either allow or not allow testing in the city of Santa Barbara, but similarly, if we can apply performance standards for these uses. Distribution and transportation are the next level in the pipeline. They receive marijuana products from cultivators and manufacturers and then distribute. This also includes warehousing within the city, so this is typically a warehouse use. The cannabis trailer bill would charge distributors with being the tax collectors for the state. And then transportation, which is sometimes related to distribution, but is not necessarily, is merely just the operating of the vehicles to transport from one license type to another. Again, with these, we have the opportunity to restrict or prohibit to certain land uses, and then also to require certain security or aesthetic or other nuisance criteria. Additionally, with transportation, there's the option to restrict the land use, which is where you're storing those vehicles to certain zones. but we cannot restrict the use of city streets for transporters traveling to or through points in the city. And then last, I think this is the part that is most familiar to the public, is the face of recreational marijuana is the dispensary, of which there are two types of licenses. One is just a strict dispensary. The other is a micro business, where several of the other licenses are integrated on a small scale to include manufacture, grow, and distribution, as well as retail. Those products would still be transported independently to be tested separately, but it would otherwise be just a small in-house operation. With dispensaries, we have a number of options as a city to consider regulation or prohibition of retail sales. We could consider using the land use maps that we've already created for medical marijuana, either as a resource or as a starting point. We should also consider whether the city wants to regulate or prohibit on-site use. Additionally, with deliveries, we should consider regulating or prohibiting deliveries either to or from city addresses. We cannot regulate travel through the city, and I also want to point out that although we do not have operating medical dispensaries in the city at the moment, we do have a robust delivery operation, as evidenced by weedmaps.com. So there's some other licenses that may be issued after the, assuming that Governor Brown signs the trailer bill that he promoted, that I want to just discuss briefly, because I think it's important that the city either craft its regulations to be broad enough to accommodate evolving licensure, or be prepared to revisit the subject as new emerging markets show up. But a few other commercial uses that could be new license types that could be created are edible manufacturing, distinct from the volatile or non-volatile extraction, packaging, distinct from manufacturing as well, and non-dispensary delivery, such as delivery from a fulfillment center where they don't have a storefront shop. It's just straight from the warehouse to the consumer, like an online sale. Additionally, with non-commercial cultivation, at the moment we have an ordinance that allows qualified patients to cultivate up to 100 square feet of medical marijuana, either indoors or outdoors. The AUMA allows the cultivation of up to 6 plants, either indoors or outdoors. These policies are slightly incongruent. They're not really, they don't relate to each other well, and it is possible that we would end up with qualified patients being allowed to cultivate both 100 square feet and 6 plants. So I think an important consideration there is bringing our local ordinance into consistency with the new law. I also wanted to point out that currently proposed California Marijuana Tax Fund, I think it'll be California Cannabis Tax Fund soon, is a grant program that would 50% to local government, 50% to nonprofits for community reinvestment programs, that is funded through the state's recreational marijuana tax. For a local government to be eligible to apply for those grants, it must allow commercial cultivation of some sort. It must allow non-commercial, private, personal, outdoor cultivation, and it must allow for dispensaries. So if we prohibit any or all of those, then that grant opportunity is close to the city. As I mentioned earlier, Measure D passed last year, which gave council up to 20% excise tax on gross receipts. That is the highest of the 40 or so that were approved last year by local governments in California. We don't currently assume any revenue in our budget under that, being conservative in that sense, be speculative otherwise. staff is not prepared to have a robust conversation about what the tax is or ought to be, but this could be something that council could direct us to come back at another date for. So in conclusion, I'd like to ask council to provide some direction to staff regarding marijuana in each of these business categories. I'd like to, although I've structured them here in the order that they appear in attachment 1 to the council agenda report, I think it would be most helpful to follow the seed to sale format so that we address retail use last and make sure that we address each of the business categories, if that's all right with you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have some public comment speakers, but any questions first from council? Okay.
I actually did have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the California Marijuana Tax Fund? So how much money is that available? So what is a typical local government grant going to end up being?
It's difficult to say as the forecasts for the state's tax revenue are fairly speculative, but I believe they begin with $20 million in the first year that they'll be dispersed, and so then that'll be dispersed over the number of grant awards. Depends on the size of the
potentially hundreds of cities, 400 incorporated cities going after $20 million. Is that what you're telling me the math sort of could be at the beginning?
It could be. Depends on the number of cities that are eligible to participate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dominguez?
I had a question about the delivery model and then our tax. So it looks like from the chart, any person making deliveries in city is subject to business tax of 20%. This is the first page, third column, or on the bigger one, maybe the second page.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that's correct.
So if someone has a business in San Luis Obispo and they're delivering into the city, they would have to get a business license here to operate?
Yes, and the taxable events in the measure approved by the voters are very broad. So it's any business activity, including but not limited to transporting is one of the items. And that term includes distribution, but distribution is covered separately as well.
It's covered by the 20%?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to the public, and thank you for your patience. We'll start with Tracy Trotter. It'll be followed by Ryan Howe. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Madam Mayor and Council, thank you so much. I wanted to come before you today as you go down this road, as the county is already into it. They have opened it up just for growers. And of course, 95% of all growers have stamped everything on there because they would like to vertical in having a license or a permit for everything. I have been a extractor in the Tri-County area for over 3 years. I have 3 different types of machines, and that's so whatever machine you come up with, I'll have one of them. So I know an awful lot about extraction, what it does, what the safety mechanisms are. I have purposely and willfully gone to M-zoned buildings because I think that's where you're going to end up. I would just like you to, when you're going down this, have everybody apply for 1 license or permit at a time, not 6. Obviously, there's 1 or 2 that they can't apply for, but please be aware that the cultivators are going to go for everything they possibly can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Howe, and then Bobby Fedor, and then Liz Rogan.
Hi, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you. I'd just like to say that I'm the founder of the Canopy Health and Wellness Center, currently a conditionally approved dispensary here in the city of Santa Barbara. And I applaud the staff for coming with these proposals and recommendations. I think it's exactly what our business needs. Right now, we're kind of, as dispensary operators, we're in a bit of between a rock and a hard place in that we can't make our products here in the city, but then we're not allowed to go outside the county area and acquire product. So it's difficult to acquire product. It's difficult to make product when there's really no licensing available to do it. I think that as my staff and I have researched the various counties and cities statewide who have implemented these types of permitting structures, we've seen that there's certainly been tremendous a tremendous amount of positive things that can come about from permitting these types of activities. I think it gives the organizations within the cannabis community a roadmap. I think that it allows for certainly quite a few tax benefits in all of the different areas. And I would like to share, if it's okay with the staff, some of our findings from around the state in terms of some of the ways that these things have been implemented. But I just wanted to say that I think I'm very much in support of this, and I think there's a lot of benefit to it. And I hope you'll take careful consideration into it, as I know that you will, and be careful and put the applicants under the same scrutiny that I went under. So I'd just like to thank everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Bobby Fedor.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Bobby Fedor. I'm a board member of the Cannabis Coalition here in Santa Barbara County. I've been involved in the industry for quite some time. It's been a very positive experience. I was also involved in the industry down south in Los Angeles, and it was quite a battle. And, you know, the attitude here, at least the county-wise, and from what I'm seeing already today, has been great. I just wanted to thank you and you know, for my 2 cents worth, just focus on an open and fair marketplace, and then to really consider the testing, because there's not a lot of product that's being produced right now that would pass testing, and that would be one of the most important things that you guys could do. Thank you.
Liz Rogan, and then the final speaker will be James Devine.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council. Thank you so much for your time today. So first I want to introduce myself. My name is Liz Rogan. I am a local delivery service operator, and I'm also the vice co-chair of the Cannabis Business Council of Santa Barbara County. We have been working closely with the county to help develop an ordinance, and we would love to work with you also. And we will provide our information, so you can reach out to us for any information or resources, anything we can provide. I'm here today to speak on behalf of not only the local cannabis business owners and operators and the local patients, also community members. There's a lot of patients who do benefit from this medicine and these places, these people that are serving them. There's lots of people in Santa Barbara who have cancer, Crohn's disease, seizures, amputees, veterans with chronic pain, PTSD that we serve in this area. Obviously, today we're talking about the adult use, but I do believe personally that we still have a lot to do under the MCRSA. Currently, though there has been one dispensary permitted, there's still nothing open for over 2 years for patients in this town. So really, there's no legal way and safe access for patients to currently get that, aside from a delivery service, which I believe is currently banned. So I know that everything's changing so much. I know last time you were under a very tight constraints to make a decision that wasn't comfortable with not much information. So as this changes, we just ask that you essentially look for a fair economic and positive way to roll this out. We do have that 20% maximum tax. I mean, that's really a really large tax. And to think if you're going to essentially tax people out of business, or there's only 3 people allowed to operate in dispensaries, it's going to be hard. It's going to limit the amount of money you're going to get. If you opened up it to more people, more open market, then you're going to get more tax money. You can lower it a little better, can be a little bit more fair, and it'll also build a sustainable business.
Thank you. And Mr. Dominguez has a question for you, if you want to come back.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, what's the name of the organization that you're with?
We are the Cannabis Business Council of Santa Barbara County.
Okay. Does your organization do anything in terms of safeguards or policing the industry? One of my main concerns is my district has a lot of K through 12 students. Do you guys do any outreach or anything to help make sure that the product doesn't get into the hands of youth?
We do, actually, yes. The delivery services I work with, we actually donate to local chapters to help keep children off violence, off guns, drugs, violence, off the streets. And yes, we do, actually. I specifically work as kind of a community outreach director and work with a lot of local areas. We also have, with the Business Council, we have a hotline that you can contact us, and we are definitely just want to be good actors. We want to work with the city and the people to make this safe for everyone. These people, we're community members, we have children too, and we're just asked that you zone it in the right places. And also for the children, zone it in the right places, and then also just for the kids, like test it so that we know that we're getting the right medicine, and keeping it in Santa Barbara will keep our money here.
Thank you.
So thank you.
James Devine.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. City Attorney, my name is James Devine. I'm an attorney, but I'm not wearing my attorney costume today. I am also a lifetime member of the National Legal Committee for NORML, and I'm the co-author of Medical Marijuana Law in California, which was published in 2011. I'm a relatively new resident here in Santa Barbara, having moved here in September, but want to compliment in both terms of those ways that word is used with respect to the presentation today. Not only was it very good, but I think there's some additional information that the council might want to entertain when it's making its decisions. My discussions with the State Board of Equalization representatives indicate that they anticipate that fund being a lot closer to $100 million a year, much more than the $20 million that was previously discussed in the presentation. And the other aspect that I want to remind you is that Mr. Klong can tell you that there have been some appellate decisions that confirm that when a city or a county has a regulatory ordinance, it can be enforced criminally. And without a regulatory ordinance, you're left to nuisance abatement lawsuits, which can drag through the courts for years and years. So I want to empower our police department to really effectuate the City Council's goals by having a full regulatory ordinance that can be enforced both criminally and civilly, and from a licensed and disciplinary position as well. I think there are numerous jobs that can be created, particularly on the laboratory testing side, where you're not going to see a tremendous amount of cannabis coming through the city, but you're going to take advantage of our extremely great colleges like City College and UCSB, and take advantage of the brain power we have here in our county and our city to take advantage of jobs that are going to be taking place in California. And we can have the jobs, the job revenue, the business tax revenue here in this wonderful city, in this wonderful place at a point going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. Just in terms of process, we're just here this is the first time we've got, and actually I want to compliment you on how well I was able to understand all the complexity components of this report. So thank you for that. If I'm understanding our process correctly, we need initial ideas, direction from council. It will go to the ordinance committee. It has to go to the planning commission because there's zoning issues at play, and then back to council. Is that the pathway we hope to
Yes,
achieve?
Madam Mayor, that's correct. It
Okay.
may not need to go to Planning Commission if we choose not to take action with respect to any zone, but that seems unlikely.
Right. Exactly. Okay. All right. And can we anticipate, should all go well, I know that's a preface statement, but that we could do this within the next 6 months?
Madam Mayor, staff's expectation is to try to complete this before the state begins their licensing program. Although that's scheduled to begin January 1, most experts believe that'll be more like April or May of next year. So there might be some wiggle room, but 6 months is our goal at the moment, yes.
Right. I'm thinking more of the people who are up here to have continuity of thought, because come January, there'll be changes up here. So, okay. So there was a suggestion, and I agree with it, that if we could just first focus on everything but retail and dispensaries, and let's have that conversation, and then we can get direction about retail and dispensaries, that would be helpful. So the other items being cultivation, delivery, manufacture, distribution, transportation, and testing. And I think just at this point, just getting perspectives from council so the ordinance committee knows where to start since we're here. And why don't we start with Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so I'll just go down the list. In general, I support our city having licenses for all of the categories. Cultivation, certainly for personal non-commercial use, someone should be able to grow outdoors. Grow commercially outdoors in the city limits. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of opportunity for that. But I do support cultivation in the city. So skip retail for now, you're saying? Okay. Restrict to and from addresses in the city limits. So they can't deliver from outside the city? Is that what that's suggesting?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, at the moment we do not allow a delivery from anything other than a licensed and operating medical marijuana storefront collective. The City Council has the options to remove that or restrict it to any certain businesses within the city, or to remove it completely.
I think it should be broader than that. Restrict license types. I guess I'm not understanding that one so well. Let me come back to that one. Yes, and we should have certain zones we should have certain zones for manufacturing and distribution and testing. So, thank you.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I think I would just start philosophically that I liked what one of the speakers said about there being an open and fair market. I think that the voters of Santa Barbara have spoken multiple times about their interest in having cannabis available to city residents over a number of years, and I don't think it really is much different than any other product. As long as it's appropriately cited in the right zone and there are the proper controls through a conditional use permit on some of the specific impacts that might come from that process. But I don't think philosophically I have any trouble with any of these issues with the right parameters from the ordinance committee in terms of the impacts on residences. The one thing I think, speaking about retail, is I do think that there's a lot of
We're going to hold off on retail just yet.
all right, well, just hold off on retail then.
Thank you.
I don't think we should be restricting distribution to addresses from within the city limits. I think that's an artificial constraint. I don't know how we would actually regulate that in practical form either. I do struggle a little bit with the outdoor personal cultivation. I know that puts us in conflict with the state fund and how much money that might potentially generate, but I am concerned about odors in neighborhoods. I could see that being an issue in residential neighborhoods. So,
Thank you. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As one of the speakers earlier brought up, I think we need to maximize local control to the extent possible by state law, and we have to seize that opportunity while we can, because it's once again we're dealing with an initiative law that's in contravention to federal law. So we went through this before. We didn't do it very well before. We were the one city in the Tri-Counties that had official dispensaries, and it didn't end well. And we had some bad actors, and it was a bit of a mess. And at that point in time, you had a president and a attorney general who would have thought been more amenable to this, and they reversed stance, and that's when we got into problems. And now you have a very different president, a very different attorney general. So I'm not ready to be too cavalier about this. I think we have to be very careful and very deliberate on how we do this. I do think that what I've heard from advocates over the years is that let's do this like alcohol. And I'm going, okay, well, if we do it like alcohol, alcohol has an amazing tracking system because it has an amazing taxation system. So you know exactly where it came from, what it contains, how it got to where it went, what's on the truck, what the final customer gets and what the final customer pays, and all of that is taxed in every sense of the way. 20% sounds like a lot. It's nothing compared to alcohol and tobacco. So trust me on that. So if we do that, we can do things like distribution and transportation in a very sane, very controlled way, making sure that the outliers don't become part of the industry, but that we actually control and tax and collect and regulate what we have. Things like testing, manufacturing, delivering, all that can be controlled in that same model if we choose to do that. I intend to try to put that forward as a way to do this. I am concerned with what we say or do about cultivation, especially outdoors. And we're not talking about retail yet, obviously, but no matter what people think, I mean, Mr. Hart's not wrong. People did vote. They did want to have this here, but nobody wants to be next to it. That's just the way it is. They're attractive nuisances, or what Carpinteria is going through right now with the odor situation. So we have to avoid all that. We have to remember that no matter what we think we want, what we want to do, we're still Santa Barbara. We still have neighborhoods. Neighborhoods should have autonomy, and they should have quality of life. So we want to make sure we're very respectful of all that as we go forward. So when we're done with comments, Madam Mayor, I'll be ready to make a motion based on staff recommendations.
Okay. Just to clarify something about, because outdoor cultivation, the issue related to the funding from the state, you can't ban, in terms of outdoor cultivation, it's only non-commercial, correct? I'm looking at your list. And our current, we were already allowing up to 1,000 square feet of 100 square feet of non-commercial. So would that satisfy the requirement here if we kept that status quo?
Madam Mayor, I believe the second two items under our existing regulation, the non-commercial outdoor cultivation and retail sales, we currently have a limited allowance for within the city. We do not allow commercial cultivation within the city. So if the city took no action and just we continued with our existing municipal code regulations, we would be ineligible at this point.
We would be ineligible
because
of
we
the
do not allow
commercial cultivation, not because of the other two.
The other two we provide, we accommodate.
Right, okay. So that would, all right. So
Just a clarification, Madam Mayor. We allow for personal cultivation of medical marijuana by a qualified patient. So it's different than what the AUMA allows, which is recreational or non-medical marijuana.
But we could still limit it to 100 square feet and still qualify for. I'm just hearing if it's a all-out ban, then you're not eligible.
Correct.
But if you allow it to some capacity, it could be very small, but still allow, then that takes care of that concern about potential state funding.
With regards to outdoor, yes, but the Adult Use of Marijuana Act is specific as to 6 plants, so we would have to be careful with regards to
I mean, it's
that.
something to explore is what I'm trying
Yes.
to get at. Okay. All right. Mr. Dominguez?
So the troubling aspect for me, and this is wearing my lawyer costume, which is hard to get out of, the federal regulation and what has happened in the past and what could happen in the future is troubling. I think so of the categories, the one that I'm least uncomfortable with, to use that double negative, is the testing, because I think it leverages some of the technology and economy that Santa Barbara wants to keep increasing, which is working with UCSB and Santa Barbara City College, working on green tech and blue tech, and really leveraging our brand and our reputation as being environmentally friendly and organic. So that's the one that I think we should try to encourage the most if we do encourage these, or be concerned with the tax consequences on that particular category? Otherwise, I don't have any comments different from what the other council members have said.
Great. I'll just add, I don't see any other lights on, but the manufacturing piece to me, I guess I would like to, I guess there were two different types of licensing and one about volatile solvents. And I guess that would be something I'd want to know at least a little bit more about, and whether or not we should allow manufacturing using volatile solvents. There are other opportunities in using non-volatile solvents that might create a more safe environment in terms of the manufacturing piece. So if we can limit ourselves to those, I guess I would prefer that. That still allows options for manufacturing. And but otherwise, I'm pretty much, I think everyone's saying the same thing for everything else. It's just the question of the details, and that's what the ordinance committee can do. But in concept, that's fine. Any other comments on those items, and we'll go back to retail. All right, so go ahead, Mr. White. Did you want to add anything?
Say on the commercial, it sounds like one of the areas where grant eligibility, such that it is, whether it's 20 or 100 million, that the I would support commercial growing that's not impacting the neighborhood or the neighbors. Would be just the neighborhood compatibility being a key factor in whatever
So maybe
is allowed.
if the ordinance committee could look to see what the least amount of cultivation commercial that could qualify for those grants, that and then where it goes. I guess it's a zoning issue of where it could go as well. So that's that might really limit the availability of options, but still keep us eligible. And that's again a detail I think the ordinance committee could look at. Mr. Hotchkiss, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Quick question. We're talking about state eligible for state money. What kind of money are we talking about? Do we know?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Hotchkiss, it's pretty broad as defined in Prop 64. It's not been fleshed out.
I'm talking about quantity. Do we have any idea what?
That was the 20 to 100 million, depending on who you talk to.
20 to 100.
My understanding is its first year is $20 million, but it is expected to grow.
And that's statewide or for us?
That would be statewide.
Oh, not too much.
We'll take the 20 million. That changes everything.
I want to be sure about that one.
Wait, one can ask. Okay, all right. So I'm hearing pretty good consensus on all those items. So to move forward with those details to allow these options, I think there was consensus about the volatile versus non-volatile. I saw a lot of nods. And then I guess the question is on the details about the outdoor cultivation piece. So, all right. So then going back to retail. Do you want to actually, so let me ask a question that might help the discussion. We currently have an ordinance on the books related to medical dispensaries. And so should that be incorporated or not? Or, how does that work? And maybe you can walk us what those options may be, because that's complicated.
Madam Mayor, yes, absent direction, I would start with our existing ordinance as a framework for accommodating adult use or recreational use, in that we've already prescribed certain zones and a certain number of dispensaries. Whether this is the direction that council wishes to continue to go, or if there's other directions, that's one of the things that we would like to hear today.
Okay.
Madam
Yes,
Mayor
Mr.
and members of the council, and Ms. Ostranger has been the lead on this. She may want to help me out with this. My view of the existing ordinance is that it's badly dated because it's built around the old Attorney General's guidelines that called for collectives and cooperatives under the Compassionate Use Act. So I think the Rubicon question for the council is, do you want to accept the commercial model that the new laws seem to want? Teva, is there more there?
No, that's about right. We need to direction on what, just specifically since we're going there now with dispensaries, AUMA recognizes that there's retail sales, they call them retail sales, and micro businesses. We currently have our existing ordinance that only speaks to medical marijuana dispensaries and requires this collective cultivation model, which is contemplating an integrated model of the seed to sale kind of thing. The Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act goes somewhat away from that and recognizes that it's not necessary that a dispensary do the seed to sale, so that's an option that we can consider. But so for right now, yes, the Municipal Code 2880, it works with regards to this weird rub with the collective model.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Rouse, your light's on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as we talk about the storefronts and the model we had before, as I recall from our previous discussion, the old medical marijuana storefronts that were zoned and permitted don't necessarily fit the retail model. Am I correct in that memory? In terms of like their use and location, traffic, parking requirements, all things we anticipate that would be a much different type of use than a limited number of patients per day. In other words, they don't automatically convert.
That's correct. They would have to apply for a state medical dispensary license as well. They could continue to operate under our license for, I believe it's a year, and then they need to apply to the state.
Continue to operate as a medical dispensary?
Yes.
Not as a retail store?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
And Councilmember Rouse, if I remember correctly, the only state law advantage for the existing medical dispensaries is they get priority, kind of get to the front of the line in the state licensing process.
Was there not a drop dead date on that, though, however?
There was. It was September of 2016. We don't have any operating at that time, and no, none were. So they won't take priority.
They won't take that, so we're starting anew.
Yeah.
In this whole process. Okay, so and that will probably be something that ordinance will want to be able to defer to, Planning Commission on, one would think. Mr. Wagner, we've got some questions. I think most of us are not that familiar with the manufacturing. We have the two types they talked about up here. And clearly we've had incidents around the city that our fire chief would tell us about that weren't positive outcomes. I know you've got experience down in San Diego. Can you tell us just a little bit about how that works, where they are, and what the neighborhood implications are?
Currently, the city of San Diego is not allowing any lawful manufacturing, but they're bringing that online in the next 18 months or so. There are many different other communities throughout the state that allow for lawful manufacturing. Specifically, Oakland, California was the first. It's an 8,000 square foot facility. It's a medical facility. It has about $9 million worth of medical equipment to bring online certain types of oils and salves, and they're using a closed-loop extraction system that's non-volatile. Closed-loop extraction is bringing hundreds of pounds of trim, where you have the whole plant, the flower, you grind it up, you put it in a high-pressure cylinder, and you bombard that high-pressure cylinder with CO2 gas. The CO2 gas interacts with the plant and releases the THC from the chlorophyll. Because of the boiling temperature of CO2 gas, you're able to boil off the leftover CO2 gas relatively easily, and then you're left with oil. Volatile extraction works in the same way. However, you're using a volatile solvent to extract. The challenge with volatile extraction is it leaves a residue. CO2 gas is used with the medical community because it does not leave a residue at all. I think there's a vast difference between a home operator that's blowing themselves up in their house and a $9 million medical facility that you could bring online. That $9 million medical facility has the capability of bringing robust taxation to the city of Berkeley.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. and I would, hopefully my colleagues would agree with me that being wooed and or coerced by the AUMA and their promise of dollars that don't even have yet, and forgetting that we are Santa Barbara and forgetting that we have neighborhoods and wanting to say, well, gosh, we'll miss out on all these funds if we don't do X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to go there personally, and I hope my colleagues would feel the same way about that, because I know that having tracked Colorado and Washington both, I mean, they had revenue projections which did not come to fruition, and they've had also enforcement expenses that have been exceeded what they planned on. So that's why we went after taxation, and we did, and that's why we're setting up the way we are. So I want to be serious about this and go from what I think before was kind of the Beavis and Butthead approach to this whole subject to making adult choices about business and structures around the town.
And Madam Mayor and Council Member, it's important to note when you bring up taxation that not all the components are created equally. Your manufacturing component will probably be the biggest workhorse for your taxation in this particular city. But the least amount of taxation most likely would be cultivation. Many municipalities have chosen to do something by square foot for different components rather than a percentage.
Well, as Ms. Murillo brought up, I mean, I can't imagine where in Santa Barbara you're going to have enough single acreage to make it viable anyway. I mean, Carpinteria seemed to have kind of taken the pole position in that.
And I would point out to you, Council Member, that it's about 50-50, the different types and strands of cannabis that are outdoor cannabis versus indoor cannabis. Indoor cannabis is your more exotic strains that are probably used for a medical purpose. Your outdoor strains are most likely used for other manufacturing of probably edibles, cookies, oils, things of that nature.
And the last question about manufacturing. So the example you used seemed like it took an amazing amount of product to have a viable, financially stable operation. Like the one you talked about, that was a big $8 or $9 million facility. And so when you say that would bring that tax revenue to that city, you'd have to be able to scale it down if you wanted to do that, something like that here that would make sense. And of course, then you'd have to find a suitable location that would be, but you'd have to still would take a large amount of raw product to come up with a viable amount.
It's hundreds of pounds per week in some of these facilities.
Right.
And understand that this is scientific based, that you have a whole bunch of chemical engineers and chemists, scientists that have made a career of being able to produce the cleanest, clearest product possible.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I don't know that I would start off the dialogue about talking about being wooed and coerced by the industry about tax dollars. I don't think that's what anybody's talking about here. So, but I do think there are maybe some significant philosophical differences amongst us, and I do think it's important for us to kind of surface those now, because we are on a tight time frame. Doing this in 6 months is not going to be simple, particularly if there's differences of opinion at ordinance versus the council, and we get into this tricky loop where ordinance goes down a path, goes to planning commission, that path gets vetted, and the council has a different opinion. So I do think this is good use of our time right now to talk about that. And my sense of it is that this is there's not anything related to what used to happen in this world. That I think we are talking about a level of sophistication, investment, and professionalism in this emerging industry that doesn't have anything to do with the past and all the preconceptions that we had about retail establishments and operations and impacts in neighborhoods. This is a different thing. This is more like, as you said, how alcohol is regulated in the state of California. That's where we're going. We may not be there today, and there may be growing pains as we get there, but I think we need to build a regulatory scheme that recognizes that future reality and adjusts accordingly over time, not restricts the operation of these retail establishments based on past experience. Because the concentration effect that we have in our existing dispensary ordinance is the biggest flaw in terms of impacts to neighborhoods, because we only basically allow 3 licensed facilities in the city. And that doesn't make any sense in this business environment, I don't think. And the more we allow professional retailers to just operate regularly, the less impact that's going to have in any one specific location. That's been my experience when I travel around to other places in the state and just look at the businesses that exist in cities where this exists. There are no impacts, or you don't see anybody. There's a storefront, and it looks no different than the storefront next door, and there's not a line of people and 50 cars going in because there's enough retail establishments to take care of the needs of the community. So that I hope we talk about that in enough detail today to send this down the right course to ordinance, because I really am concerned that there may be bigger differences here than we're nicely talking about right now.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing you described quite an elaborate operation there. This is a city of 90,000 people. Sounds to me like that would be an enormous flood of product, if I can put it that way, to a very small population.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, it would be a wholesale market where if you are a lawful provider of this manufacturing oil, you can be delivering to different parts of California, not just our particular region, especially if you're given a land use development permit to operate in the city, which affords you the opportunity to apply for a California state license to do the same thing.
I see. You were in San Diego for a while, a long time?
I was I was a planning commissioner for the city of San Diego that brought online the 17 lawfully conforming dispensaries in the city of San Diego.
One thing we haven't asked you about, what was the impact on law enforcement there? If you could speak to that.
Yeah, I would say that the numbers, by the time I had left, which was 2.5 months ago, the numbers were not out. But the way that we had designed the store so that it didn't disproportionately affect nuisance-related activity kept the calls for service down and had a de minimis effect on how we patrolled.
Okay. Question, I guess, for staff. If we go forward, this may be too much in the weeds here, but could we, if we approve some things, could we restrict or prohibit edibles, thinking in terms of what Mr. Dominguez has said several times about children particularly?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Hotchkiss, other cities have already adopted ordinances that restrict the type of edible products that can be manufactured or sold within their city limits, such as candies that might be attractive to children. I don't know that a wholesale prohibition of edibles is viable given makes for a viable market, but that's something that we can explore.
I would also suggest that the biggest competition in the next 5 years will be the black market, and helping a business to operate safely and accurately with their taxation is their biggest challenge. Is everybody bringing all this product online in the black market and all these deliveries.
So I think what you're saying is if you can control it rather than suppress it, because if you do, then it goes to the black market. Is that what you're saying?
That's fair.
Okay.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to make it clear that I would like to take advantage of the California Marijuana Tax Fund. So if we can qualify for those grant monies, I think our residents would benefit from that. Then I would say about volatile versus non-volatile. I spent some time in our industrial zone before Councilmember Dominguez was elected, and I spent a lot of time on the east side. And there's all kinds of manufacturing that goes on down there with different kinds of chemicals. And I would ask that the ordinance committee, and I'm on it, that we would have a presentation about the chemicals. And, you gave us a snippet here, but we need to know more. What are the benefits of it? And, it sounds bad, right? Something's volatile, something's non-volatile, but this is business, and there's a lot of things that go on in the city right now where if there's safety controls and there's a benefit to us in terms of our tax revenues, then let's not shut the door until we know more about it, right? we're looking at an alcohol sales ordinance, which is going to generate revenue for law enforcement. And I think that's what we're talking about with, cannabis sales. So that would generate some revenue for law enforcement. And certainly these people are in business and they would have security. You don't want people busting into your places and taking your product. And so, of course, all of this has to have robust security and law enforcement response. And, it's the black market, Councilmember Hotchkiss, where our teens get their marijuana. And when they're not making good choices and they don't have discipline and self-esteem. And, there's a lot of programs in town that are looking at that. I'm saying this tax revenue would help us with law enforcement and the black market as well. So that's what I would say, that marijuana is pretty easy to get right now on the street by our young people, unfortunately, for those of them that are making bad choices. I know we're going to have to look at the medical marijuana laws that our ordinance has to change. I think that's what I'm hearing, right? It has to change to comply with the state law. And I just want to acknowledge, too, that anytime there's a proposal for a marijuana dispensary in this city, the neighbors do come out. So maybe that's what Councilmember Rouse was referring to. And so we'll be sensitive to that, right? But I'm hoping there's a way that we can do retail sales to comply with this grant program. And I think those were all my notes because I've been just writing stuff like crazy. And I look forward to it coming to the ordinance committee. And Councilmember Hart makes a good point that then it's going to go to the planning commission. So the more direction we can give staff right now. I think the last thing that I'll say is that in 2010, there was a ballot measure in the city of Santa Barbara to ban dispensaries, and it lost big. That was a pretty big vote, and the state of California supported medical marijuana, and now 64. Wow, that passed too. So no matter what's going on in our city in terms of security and all of us, no one wants to be a substance abuser. I get all of that. But there's a support in this city for medical marijuana and responsible adult use. And that's how I'll close my comments, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez?
So regarding the issue of transitioning from the outdated laws to the new one of the things that I'd like to include is re-looking at how we've created the zones. And I think we've discussed before, and you're all aware, the way the 600-foot worked out on the east side is it put the only spot available for dispensary right within a donut of schools. So the highest density of school children in Santa Barbara, we have a dispensary right in the middle. And I know, having spoken with the proprietor of that dispensary, he would have been happier to have it somewhere else, but because we forced it into that zone, so I'm hoping in this process we can rectify it and taking that license out of that zone and putting it into a manufacturing or industrial or one of the areas that you may have seen as more appropriate. Regarding the grants, I think we should be careful not to inadvertently exclude ourselves from a grant, but we shouldn't base our policy and the protection of the public safety and fisc around these grants. We just want to be cognizant of them, but not create policy just to make ourselves eligible for the grants.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The grants that we're hearing about here are anywhere between 50 cents and $5 a person, so it's not life-changing amounts of money. I thought that Mr. Hart's sort of logic train about what came to my mind was comparing this to the advent of or return of alcohol after the Prohibition, and just how daunting that must have been at that time to go from people running around the place shooting each other with Tommy guns and all that stuff to of course what we have today, which is a great big industry, and as Mr. Rouse was talking about, the severe tracking of it all that does go on, and seems to be, at least it has its regulatory construct, and that would appear. And then another piece is the unrealistic construct that we have had around medical marijuana. I mean, the collaboratives and collectives, and it really is like very unrealistic. So we're trying to get to a realistic model. We're being the state and the city are pushing policy in that direction, and I certainly don't have point by point. How will this unfold as a response to prohibition, or as a move away from prohibition? How do we do this sanely? And Mr. Hotchkiss made a comment about, we don't want Santa Barbara to become a marijuana hub. So where does it come? And Mr. Hart's comments were about, well, there sort of needs to be this wash, or sort of a general spreading out of the resource, spreading out of the commercial activity, such that it's not everybody collecting in one, or everybody don't use that word, everybody getting together in one particular spot for it. So it's a daunting task. I do think that Ms. Murillo's point is right, that this change has occurred with the electorate has shown us both at the local and state level that the direction that is preferred, and I'm glad that the ordinance committee gets to take this on at this point, and I'll go back to the finance committee and try and help manage the funds in order to keep this thing going.
I'll add, this collective model just hasn't been working, so I'm all for changing our ordinance to upgrade it as appropriate under the new regulations by the state, and I want to think about the voter intent in the city here. Over three times, the issue of cannabis, one way or another, has been brought to the voters in different ways, and every single time the voters have said overwhelmingly, we want safe access, regulated, but safe access to cannabis. So I think we have to keep that in mind in terms of what we're talking about. The state law does already have some buffer areas around schools and other facilities where a retail location would be prohibited. So obviously I think we would be allowed to reduce it, but I would not suggest doing so. I think we should stay within the state regulations there. That would help a lot in terms, I think, of what Mr. Dominguez is talking about. I guess the other thought was to balance out what Mr. Hart was saying, and I think very well, with not wanting to create a situation where we have clusters in certain parts of town. So I don't know if there's a density, the word density comes back in here, aspect of, and that was the concern, I think, before things got regulated with the medical marijuana dispensaries, that a whole bunch showed up in one part of town and really created some kind of neighborhood impacts. And I think that's what Mr. Hart was getting at, was that he wanted to spread that out so that no one area gets really targeted as the magnet go-to place. So whether that's through zones or the licensing regulation piece in terms of making sure the safety and security aspects of it, and everyone's following through with whatever other state requirements are there, I think that would make sense. The whole process with the staff hearing officer and appealing to planning commission is confusing, and it just brings up, I think, anyone who just doesn't like it, the issue is just going to appeal it, and it's just going to put the ordinance into question. So I wonder whether if that's really the best approach, or if it's just a business license that has very strict regulation that needs to be updated on a regular basis. That seems to make more sense than if anyone wants to. It just the process that we have now is just it seems very convoluted and not helpful for staff or even the applicants in trying to get something accomplished under the ordinance that we have in place. So those would be my comments there. So I would be reluctant to ban a retail component to it, but I would appreciate and understand trying to find some fail-safes of not having it clustered in certain parts of town. So maybe a maximum of so many areas in a certain, I don't know, we have 6 districts now. We can look at it by district even, or something like that. I mean, to even the playing field. Yes, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I think another important distinction that there is a vast majority of these components are business-to-business components in a nondescript facility or something that looks like a warehouse that you wouldn't really have a whole lot of interaction with the public. The point-of-sale transactions are the ones that cause the most exorbitant cost to public safety resources. But the testing or transportation, distribution, manufacturing, cultivation don't seem to have the same challenges in a business-to-business environment where they're interacting with other licensed actors.
Right, and I would agree. And I think for those items, you're looking at what's the appropriate zone in the city, and you get a license, and that's the appropriate use in that zone, right? Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, to follow up on that, that's the point I was going to bring up about fulfillment centers, and we live in an Amazon world, and we may be able to solve a lot of our NIMBY issues by going that direction as opposed to walk-in retail. I mean, I don't know how the business model works. I'm going to try to run a motion here to see if we can move this on to ordinance committee, but I would like to request your participation, Anthony, in our upcoming ordinance committee, because you have the background, and you can tell us what did and what didn't work in your experiences, and we can, because I think that's one of the thorniest parts of this is what do we do about either storefronts, fulfillment centers, delivery, and that kind of community compatibility that probably bothers me as much as anything does. But I think staff actually teed this up pretty well, so I'm going to try to put this in the form of a motion and see what you think. I'd like to move direct staff to prepare for ordinance committee to consider the following issues, including but not limited to locations, types, and numbers of dispensaries, cultivation, manufacturing, testing, distribution, transportation of cannabis products within the city of Santa Barbara.
Second.
Okay. Great. Mr. Hart, did you have something else?
I just would only add a process recommendation that the ordinance committee spend, I don't know, a couple of months doing on this, and then come back, check in at the council before going to the planning commission. I don't want to go on a path that doesn't end up being in the right.
I was going to actually suggest exactly that. The ordinance committee either make a per meeting check back so that we don't get, I was going to say in the weeds. I know I was going to say in the weeds. But so
Well,
we don't
and
get out
to
there.
be clear, anything related to Title 28 in the zoning would require a 5-vote majority of this council to pass. So we want to make sure before we go down a path. Yes, Mr. Kalan.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of the council, given the time frame we have to get this done, I'd like to have the opportunity to have a draft prepared of some ordinance changes to bring to the ordinance committee. The reason being that this stuff is really hard to deal with without specifics and kind of graphical representation. So I think the sooner you get to a binary yes, no, we like that, or it should be 7, not 6, the quicker we'll be done with this. So if that's okay, I'd like that included in the motion.
That sounds great. So the motion would include that the city attorney's office would present a draft to the ordinance committee of these items. Is that?
Well, we're good, but we need the assistance of CD too, so don't.
Correct. The team, the staff team. Okay. And anything else on the motion? All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good luck, ordinance committee. Have fun with that. Thank you all for your comments. Really appreciate it. And to be continued. So with that, we have some council member committee assignment reports. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the West Side Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors meeting yesterday, and they're creating a new space for teens, and they're looking for donations of couches and other comfortable seating for our teens there at the Boys and Girls Club. I met with Jan Ziegler of 10 West Anapamu Art Gallery, and she's hoping that her artists can bring art to the empty storefronts on State Street, and she's been in touch with members of the downtown organization and other commercial property owners about that. The Neighborhood Advisory Council met last week looking at our infrastructure presentation. Very well done. Our city engineer is a fine young man. And they, secondary to that, the NAC wants to work with schools. They're very concerned about the quality of education in our elementary schools. I know that's not exactly a city issue, but it is a neighborhood issue for them. So they're looking at ways to bring some school principals and maybe school board trustees to the Neighborhood Advisory Council to make presentations. And the Fund for Santa Barbara had an awards ceremony, and that was really inspiring to see a lot of our local nonprofits getting support for social justice, economic justice programming. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In past Thursday, I went to the monthly AIA meeting to discuss developments along State Street and potential for a kind of a new way to look and process State Street in terms of infill for residential along with the commercial, and about what the city would be willing to do from our process standpoint and what the architects and stakeholders would be willing to do. So it was a very positive meeting, I think. And then last night I went to the Mesa to do a presentation along with Rhonda Moore and Nina Johnson to talk about the infrastructure thing that we should know by heart by now. But and that went very well. About 30 people attended.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the Kachuma Operation and Maintenance Board Administration Subcommittee, and then afterwards the Operations Subcommittee meetings last Wednesday. And what COMB is dealing with is what we're hearing about at with regards to our own water system and our own infrastructure. There's a list of valves and widgets that make that system go that are ugly and rotten and are needing to get fixed, and they're huge. So this is it's just the triage priority system that we're dealing with is just it's happening there as well. One of the things that's kind of, and also that we're dealing with on our level, is that their metering is getting much better. And so guess what? The less water is being lost, and where's the water going? The agencies that use it are getting charged more because the meters are more accurate. So there we are. And then I, too, today presented and attended with Ms. Johnson and Mr. DeMoore the Samarkand meeting on infrastructure. And again, a good meeting of people who are interested, involved, and there were a whole bunch of retired engineers and UCSB professors in the room. So we had to be on our toes.
Great. I've been on the lecture circuit, it seems like, about our desalination plant. Last week I was a speaker at the Orange County Water Summit and talked about our journey about the desalination plant, which, as you know, there's others in Huntington Beach and the Poseidon Project, which has been in the big news down there. And then tomorrow I'm actually headed up to Sacramento, where I'm speaking at the 4th Annual California Water Summit on the same issues on a panel. So that's been kind of interesting to hear from other areas around the state about what's going on. I think I'll see this week some people related to Prop 1 grant opportunities, so from DWR. So I'll certainly thank them for changing their guidelines and allowing us to compete. So, okay, we are continuing the closed session that was already mentioned earlier. It's the conference with city attorney and anticipated litigation. Do we need to reread the whole thing again? No. Okay, we're going to continue that, and we have one other closed session, if you could read that.
Of course. Item 20, closed session, subject Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Government Code Section 54957, as described in agenda item number 20.
Thank you, and we'll be adjourning from closed session. All right.